Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
The night looked normal from the street, quiet lawns, warm porch lights, and the hum of cicadas drifting through the air. I slipped out of my apartment at 10:30, backpack strapped tight, and the DoorDash app glowing on my phone. I was feeling restless, ready to chase tips and rack up miles. A suburban drop in Willow Creek felt like a breeze. Safe, predictable, a quick in and out. I had no idea it would turn into the worst hour of my life. Pulling up, I slammed the car door and grabbed the stack of pizza boxes. My kicks crunched on gravel as I walked up to the house. Everything looked neat. A pastel front door, matching welcome mat, little solar lights lining the walkway. I hit the doorbell and waited. No answer. I knocked once, louder this time, and something about the slight creak inside the house set me on edge. The door swung inward before I could step back. "Hello," I called, dropping my voice so it felt casual. No one answered, but the door was cracked enough to slip through. I hesitated because delivering inside wasn't standard, but the text said, "Leave inside," and the client rating was 5 stars. Grabbing a pizza box, I stepped inside. The floor was cool beneath my sneakers, and the soft glow from a hallway lamp invited me deeper. I set the box on a coffee table near a plush sofa and looked around. The living room was too tidy. Everything matched: cream pillows, a glass vase with white orchids, framed family photos lined up like soldiers on a shelf. It smelled clean, like laundry detergent and candles. I reached for my phone's flashlight and swept the beam across the room. That's when I saw it, a lens peeking from behind a stack of books, a tiny camera, red light blinking. My pulse kicked in. My chest tightened. I flicked my gaze to the opposite corner and spotted another camera perched on a speaker. Someone had rigged the entire room. My stomach flipped. I realized every move I made, from unlocking the door to fumbling with the pizza box, had been recorded. They'd watched me come in. They'd watched me tuck my hair behind my ear when I checked the address. A voice crackled through a hidden speaker, warm and amused, saying, "Thanks for playing along." No one was in sight. I felt hot, like I'd been caught in a spotlight. Fear spelled out in neon across my mind. I kicked the coffee table and grabbed my phone. My fingers fumbled trying to tap the emergency icon, but I kept picturing some masked stranger watching, waiting for me to panic. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and froze for a second too long. Then I bolted. My sneakers skid on the hardwood as I raced toward the front door. I could almost hear someone laughing, but it was just the echo of my own heartbeat. I yanked the door open, tripped over the threshold, and slammed into the night air. I didn't stop to look back. My legs pumped so hard it felt like they'd give out. I threw myself into the car, locked the doors, and almost forgot to breathe. My hands shook as I hit delivered on the app. I wanted to shoot off a message, but my brain was still stuck on those cameras. Who were they filming for? A private audience. Some twisted website. I stared at the pixelated map, remembered the neat lawn outside, and felt sick. I dialed DoorDash support, voice trembling, and told them something horrible had happened. The rep sounded bored and gave me the canned apology. "We'll review it and get back to you." I hung up, rage and panic flaring together. I drove around for an hour, windows down so I could breathe. Every block looked safe until it didn't. I imagined cameras behind every window, lenses aimed at me. Every shadow could hide pranks or worse. I finally parked 2 miles from home, glancing over my shoulder like some fugitive. I didn't stop until I fumbled with my front door key, unlocked it, and bolted inside. I taped kitchen knives to the counter and slept beside the couch, dressed and ready to bolt. The next day I scrolled through online forums, looking for anyone who'd seen similar setups. Nothing. No news stories, no Reddit threads, no local gossip. I tried calling the non-emergency police line, and the dispatcher signed into the phone. "We'll note it." No detective call, no statement taken. It felt like I was talking about a very elaborate prank, not a serious violation of privacy and safety. A week passed before I dared open the app again. My roommate asked why I looked haggard. I lied, said I caught a bad flu. But every time my car door clicked shut, I felt the same dread. Every driveway I pulled into had a potential camera. I carried pepper spray in my pocket and a corpse-like stillness on every delivery. When I finally completed that shift, tallied my earnings, and saw the tips, I felt numb. The money tasted like cash. I changed my delivery style: never enter houses, even if the instructions begged it. I left everything on doorsteps or porch steps. Every unlocked door became a red flag. I told DoorDash and app again to revise policies about leave inside orders. They ignored me. Emails vanished. I felt used and forgotten. Months later, I still think about that house. I imagine them sifting through hours of footage, rewinding my nervous tics, editing together clips. Maybe they posted it somewhere. Maybe they're still filming someone else. I know I'll never sleep with my back to a room without checking for cameras first. I'll never ring a doorbell without scanning windows. And I'll never trust a 5-star rating again. Because the night I thought I was just delivering pizza turned into someone else's twisted show, and nobody ever checked the channels to see if I escaped alive. My shift was dragging when the app pinged that order. Late afternoon sunlight sliced through the diner windows as I slid into my rental, craving an energy drink more than anything. I grabbed a greasy burger and fries from a roadside joint that always smelled like stale coffee and desperation. My GPS lit up, pointing me toward a rundown motel in the outskirts, the kind of place where broken neon flickers vacancy like a dying heartbeat. I was more than ready to drop off the food and get back to the city's safety, but I had no idea how quickly things could spiral. When I pulled up, the motel looked worse in person. Cracked asphalt, a sagging awning, and half the windows boarded up. I parked under a lone street lamp, grabbed a bag, and walked to the lobby. The air smelled like mildew mixed with something oily and burnt. A dusty fan spun overhead, stirring up motes that danced in the yellow light. The clerk's desk was cluttered with half-melted candles and a battered ledger full of names and dates written in cramped handwriting. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward room 12, and I headed down the hallway. The hallway floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and the light bulbs overhead buzzed. Each door loomed like a trap, paint peeling and hinges rusted. When I reached number 12, the door was cracked open, inviting me in. I paused, uneasy, but assumed the guest didn't want me knocking. Pushing the door further, I stepped inside and placed the bag on a grimy nightstand. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight against any hint of daylight. I noticed the air was cooler, almost too cold for a motel in June, and felt a prickling at the back of my neck. That's when I saw it, a burner phone lying on the bed, screen cracked but functional. Next to it, passports played out like trophies, edges worn from frantic handling. Cash stacks peeked from beneath crazy wrappers. I froze. Something in my gut tightened. I realized I wasn't just a delivery driver in this room. I was an unwitting accessory. My insulated bag was now the vessel for forged documents and illicit cash. Whoever set this up assumed I'd walk right in, bag in hand, ready to smuggle contraband across state lines. Without thinking, I reached for my own phone, thumb hovering over 911. My pulse spiked. If I made a sound, whoever was behind this set would know I'd caught on. I pictured some hidden camera watching my every move. I pictured someone whispering instructions through a speaker. Panic turned my fingers numb. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and leaned closer to the table, trying to figure out how to get out clean. A low creak behind me made me snap my head around. The door clicked shut on its own. I jumped, heart slamming against my ribs. My eyes darted to the corners, no sign of anyone, but the weight of being watched settled heavy. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. The only thing moving was my breath, ragged and uneven. I had to be out before the occupant, or their accomplice, returned. I yanked open the door, and the hallway greeted me with its flickering lights and groaning floorboards. I sprinted south, past room 13 and 14 without glancing back. My foot caught on a loose plank, and I twisted my ankle, letting out a sharp wince. Pain shot up my calf, but I pushed through it, limping toward the lobby. The stained carpet blurred beneath my sneakers as I clutched the bag to my chest. When I burst into the lobby, the clerk was gone. Empty chairs lined the walls, and the fan whirred like a mocking laugh. I leaped over the counter, snagged the keys to my rental, and darted back outside. The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed. I slammed into the night air, my lungs burning. I fumbled with the app, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped the burger bag. I tapped delivered and watched as the confirmation spun, like a countdown to disaster. I hopped into my car, locked the doors, and slumped in the driver's seat. Every mirror reflected my wide eyes and chalk-white face. I wanted to scream, but all I could manage was a ragged breath. I texted my roommate, "I need you to check on me." No reply. My phone pinged with another order request, 2 blocks from my current panic zone. I ignored it, slammed the app shut, and turned the engine over. The drive home felt like hours. Each passing street lamp cast shadows that played tricks, making every tree look like a lurking figure. I circled a few blocks before pulling into my apartment complex. I stayed in the car for a good 10 minutes, trying to steady my pulse. When I finally unlocked the door, I kept my eyes peeled until I slid the deadbolt home. I peeled off my uniform jacket, tossed it in the corner, and collapsed onto my bed with my clothes still on. Sleep never came that night. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second. My mistake walking in, the passports, the motel clerk disappearing. I wondered how many other dashers had walked into the same trap. I wondered if that room was still set for the next delivery. The thought of some criminal ring using the app's blind spots to traffic forged passports sent chills down my spine. Morning arrived too soon. My phone buzzed with notifications. A review request from DoorDash, a new order alert. I silenced my phone and left it face down on the dresser. I took a cold shower, letting the water shock my system into alertness. I stared at my reflection, half expecting fear to be wrinkling my skin. I caught sight of my rigged uniform in a corner mirror, though now it felt like armor I'd rather burn. I called DoorDash support, trying to sound calm. I told them something dangerous had happened. I didn't volunteer all the details. They apologized and promised to look into it. I didn't hold my breath. I deleted that motel drop from my history, hoping to bury it. I changed my routine. No more deserted motels, no more unlit driveways. I stuck to busy streets and high-traffic neighborhoods. I packed pepper spray and left my door unlocked until I was inside any new place. Weeks passed and the memory faded into a dull ache. I forced myself back on the app for daytime runs only. Each ping still made me tense, neck tight with dread. I never found out who set me up, and I doubt the police ever cared. But now I know how fast normal can become nightmare. Every delivery brings the chance of walking into a trap I can't outrun. And that's the real horror of this job, knowing that every time the app pings, my life could change in an instant. I still remember that morning like it was burning in my skull. The spring air felt crisp through the open car window, dew dripping off the hood as I pulled up to the suburban cul-de-sac. Birdsong bounced off the trimmed hedges and neat driveways, and I reminded myself this was just another delivery. I'd done plenty of runs for people claiming to run medical trials, those biotech startups that pop up overnight, promising cash for voluntary work. It sounded harmless enough. I grabbed the insulated bag, glanced at my phone's GPS, and headed to the glass-fronted house with the big clinical research sign planted in the lawn. I figured I'd drop off the food, get my thank you tip, and move on to my next gig. But that day, something in the way that sign caught the light felt off, like I was stepping into a spotlight I didn't want. Walking up to the front door, I tried to steady my breath. The stethoscope logoed welcome mat was too pristine, like it had been laid down only hours earlier. Doorbell rang clear through the foyer, making me pause. A tall man in a white lab coat opened the door with a curt nod. No smile, no thanks. He took the pizza box without breaking eye contact, his black-rimmed glasses reflecting the morning sun. He asked me to leave a thick envelope labeled confidential in big red capitals, beside the order as proof of receipt. His voice was calm, almost mechanical, and for a second I thought it was a recording. I backed away, feeling my skin prickle. Why would alleged trial need me to deliver secret papers? Inside the envelope was everything I shouldn't have seen. I waited until I was halfway back to my car, heart pounding so loud I could swear I heard it in my ears. Then I slid a box cutter from my glove compartment, cut through the tape, and unfolded the manila flap. The first thing I saw was a stack of medical charts, handwritten notes detailing patient histories with names blacked out, but ages and conditions clear as day. There were pill blister packs taped to the inside flap, each labeled experimental compound A54. Underneath, clipped together on metal rings, were pages of chemical formulas dense enough to make my head spin. I ran my finger across one line, saw elemental symbols and molecular weights that didn't belong in any FDA-approved protocol. Then I hit the participant list. 20 names, each followed by addresses and phone numbers. A couple of them were local celebrities I recognized from online news stories. Athletes, social media influencers, a politician's aide. They'd signed up for free medical screenings, sure, but these capers suggested something darker. My stomach sank as the truth clicked into place. This guy was running a black market prescription racket, shipping illegal compounds and maybe even untested chemicals to high-profile people looking for an edge or a quick, unregulated fix. And he was using me, one of the lowest-paid gig workers, as his courier. I sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder. I thought about tossing everything on the neighbor's lawn and speeding off. I thought about calling the cops right there. Instead, I zipped the envelope back up, shoved it in my bag, and sent a report through the app. Clinical trial site, suspicious confidential documents, patient data, potential illegal activity. The response pinged back 2 minutes later. Thanks for your report. We'll review and follow up. Follow up. The app barely handled missing orders, let alone cover human experimentation. I deleted the photos I'd snapped just in case they traced metadata. Then I drove to the nearest 24-hour coffee shop and called the non-emergency police line, giving them every detail I could remember. The dispatcher promised a patrol unit might check it out. I think I heard a sigh when I mentioned just a food delivery. By the time I got home, midday sun streaming through my apartment window, I felt hollow. Every creak in my floorboards sounded like someone sneaking up on me. I stared at that envelope on the kitchen table, debating whether to hand it over to the detective if they ever showed. I left it untouched, figuring it was evidence I shouldn't touch until the pros arrived. I deleted the app, uninstalled it entirely, but found myself reinstalling a week later because rent still had to be paid. I tricked the settings to restrict deliveries to cafes and restaurants only. No more private addresses with ticklish leave inside notes. Sleep was impossible that night. I dreamed of spreadsheets filled with chemical names instead of class schedules, of glossy headshots of people I respected plastered next to scrawled dosage instructions. I imagined the lab coat guy watching me through some hidden webcam, smirking because he recruited me without my knowledge. I couldn't shake the idea that he was still sending envelopes out, just swapping couriers. Maybe next time it'd be someone who got locked in a storage closet or forced to sample a compound themselves. When I finally dragged myself up the next morning, I wore gloves every time I touched paper. I kept my phone face on the dash, immediately snapping pictures of any package labels. Every stranger's doorbell made me jump. I avoided the cul-de-sac where that house stood, took the long route home to skip the coffee shop parking lot where I'd called the cops. I burned through headaches inventing new codes for safe words with friends in case something went south again. I told my roommate I was stressed about a breakup to explain my jittery behavior, but inside I was replaying envelopes and formulas on loop like a broken cassette. I still deliver sometimes, but only in well-lit cafes and pizza joints with open counters. I've grown wary of instructions that say inside, hidden, or confidential. If I ever see a lad coat at the door again, I'll sprint the other way. I know the downside of gig work. No background checks, no security briefings about black market trials hiding behind legitimate facades. I learned the hard way that some clients will weaponize our anonymity, slip us envelopes full of secrets that could ruin lives. I never got a call back from DoorDash or the police. No one followed up on my report. The lab coat guy probably moved on, set up shop in another zip code, and found a new courier who answered his door without thinking twice. And me. I still keep one eye on the clock whenever the app pings, reminding myself that what looks like a small tip could hide a package that changes everything. The first time I saw the warehouse looming at the end of a graffiti-tagged alley, it looked like something out of a horror movie. Huge steel doors, broken windows patched with plywood, and a buzzing fluorescent sign that read kitchen supplies. I was halfway through my shift when the app routed me there, and my gut twisted the second I pulled up. It was late afternoon, the sky gray with cloud cover, and even the usual hum of traffic felt miles away. I stared at the building and thought maybe the GPS glitched, but the order details said drop off here. I gripped the insulated bag tighter, took a deep breath, and headed in. Inside, the echo of my footsteps bounced around towering shelves stocked with pots, pans, and plastic containers. The place looked abandoned at first glance, dust everywhere, cobwebs in the corners. I followed the arrows taped to the floor, convinced I'd end up delivering to an empty factory until I heard voices behind a closed door. My heart pounded as I knocked, and the door swung open to reveal racks of tiny uniforms hanging like evidence. They were too small for any adult I'd ever met, children's sizes, tops and bottoms in neat piles, each tagged with a code I didn't recognize. I stepped inside and set the bag on a metal table, trying to keep calm. The air smelled like bleach and something more pungent, a stench that clung to the back of my throat. I glanced around and saw cages lined against the far wall, locked cages. My mouth went dry. I knelt down to peer through the bars of one and caught a glimpse of a terrified face, eyes wide, lips pressed together in silence. It was dark inside, like a storage locker, but I saw a small girl huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth. My hands shook as I held the bag out, but the woman who'd opened the door slapped it down and barked at me to confirm delivery. Her voice was clipped, no warmth, just orders. Behind her stood a man whose gaze never left the cages. He pointed to a clipboard with my name and order number. I signed off, scribbling my initials on the dotted line, feeling like every letter burned on my skin. I wanted to drop the pen, pull it back out into the alley, and delete the app forever. They herded me down another corridor toward a shipping dock. The woman grabbed my insulated bag and dumped it into a large plastic bin beside a forklift. The bin rattled against the metal as she dumped frozen meals in with my bag. I realized they were moving packs of people like cargo, using my bag to disguise them under layers of food trays. My brain short-circuited. This wasn't kitchen supplies, it was human trafficking, a drop site hidden behind a fake storefront. I forced myself to keep breathing. My palms were slick with sweat, and every instinct screamed to run. But they stood too close, their arms blocking the exit, eyes tracking my every move. I stared down at the concrete floor, calculating how fast I could sprint if they flinched. Instead, I gave them a curt nod, turned as if to leave, then slipped through an open side door leading to a back alley. My sneakers slapped against broken glass as I sprinted for the street. I didn't look back until I reached my car, panting like I'd run a marathon. I yanked the door open, threw in the bag, locked the doors, and pressed my head against the steering wheel. My heart hammered so loud I almost couldn't hear myself think. Sweat pooled at my temples and goosebumps rippled down my arms despite the humid air. I sat there for a long minute, counting breaths. Inhale, exhale, inhale. Then I tapped the help button in the app, typing as fast as I could. Warehouse drop site, trafficking children in cages, handle urgently. The response pinged 5 minutes later. Thank you for your report. We will investigate. Investigate? I laughed, a short, bitter sound that shook the car. It didn't even ask for details or photos. It just sent me back to work. I stared at the road and realized I couldn't go back out there. Not tonight, not ever. I deleted the order, uninstalled the app. My phone felt heavier without it, like I'd broken something fragile by removing it. I called my sister and left a breathless voicemail. Don't ever let me work for that company again. Her reply was a mix of concern and disbelief, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the full horror. That night, I lay on the floor of my apartment, sleeping bag pulled around me like armor. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, sounded like footsteps closing in. My dreams were replaying that dark corridor, the cages, the tiny uniforms. I woke before dawn, feeling like I'd aged a decade in those few hours of restless sleep. Over the next few days, I scored news sites for missing child reports near my city. Nothing. No headlines about trafficking rings using ghost kitchens as fronts. I'd even checked local forum threads, hoping someone else had noticed something. Crickets. It was as if the whole place never existed except in my memory. The lack of confirmation gnawed at me more than the memory itself. Eventually, I returned to gig work, but strictly for storefront pickups. Cass, pizza joints, sandwich shops, any place with a real counter and staff who waved me in. I got comfortable with cash exchanges and calls through walkie-talkies at drive-thrus. Every time I drove past that alley, I gripped the steering wheel tight and peered at the warehouse, half expecting the doors to swing open and the cages to be empty. I never told my parents. They'd worry, maybe forbid me from working altogether. My friends think I quit because of burnout. But in my mind, I quit because I walked into a trap where children were hidden behind a wall of frying pans and plastic bins, and no one cared enough to check. Now when the app pings, I jump. I check the address twice, verify the business name online, and only accept orders when I can see the people behind the counter. I still think about those cages. Sometimes I imagine going back with a camera and enough proof to shut that place down. Other times I worry that whatever I saw was part of a larger network, and calling it out puts them on alert. For now, I stick to well-lit streets and businesses that feel real. I can't unsee what I saw, but I can refuse to be part of it again. Every shift I remind myself, kitchens should smell like fresh bread and coffee, not fear. I was cruising down the back roads at sunset when the app pinged to drop at a place called Evergreen Clinic. It sounded like a cozy healing center, maybe herbal infusions or acupuncture, so I pictured a calm waiting room, soft music, smiling faces. My car's headlights cut through the dusty lane as I turned onto a gravel drive. The clinic sign hung crooked on rusty chains, half hidden by pine branches. The building looked like a prefab shack someone forgot to finish. My gut twisted, but the pay was decent, so I shrugged and drove up to the single sliding door. Inside, the air was cold like a walk-in freezer, and the hum of a broken refrigerator filled the lobby. A single nurse's station sat beneath a flickering fluorescent light, papers scattered across the countertop. No front desk attendant. A clipboard on a stack of magazines listed names, none familiar. I carried the insulated bag to the counter and called out, "Delivery for Evergreen." My voice sounded small. From a back corridor, a nurse in scrubs appeared, dark circles under her eyes. She grabbed the bag and slipped me a small box of medical iced packs with a patient name that didn't match any on the clipboard. No question, no thank you. Her voice was a whisper as she said, "Place this in the storage room." She pointed down a hall where the tile floor ended and raw concrete began. I gave a thumbs up and clicked back to my car, but something kept me there. A dull ache pressed against my ribs and I realized I hadn't confirmed payment. I tapped the app. It showed completed and a tiny thank you. I didn't want to leave it at that. I walked back inside, asking about the clinic's hours and what they treated. The nurse didn't turn around. She just slid the ice pack box into a second insulated bag and pushed it back toward me. I glanced at the label. Urgent transplant. Transplant? I swallowed hard. I'd seen urgent on pizzas and groceries, never organs. "You sure this is right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. She paused, hand on the bag, and shrugged without looking. Something clicked. My phone had a flashlight mode. I tapped it on and shone the beam into the box. Beneath the ice packs lay 3 sealed latex bags, each marked in black marker with a patient ID. The plastic looked wet, obscuring the contents slightly, but I saw shapes. Tubular, soft. My breath caught. There were organs on ice, probably for illegal transplants. I recognized the labeling style from a crime doc I binge-watched last year. My pulse spiked. I imagined some desperate surgeon waiting in a back alley for my delivery, scalpel in hand. I pictured bodies on operating tables, or worse, organs harvested from someone who never knew. I stared at that nurse's back, memorizing her scrubs and the way her shoulders dropped. I tapped my phone's camera app, aiming the flashlight and preparing to snap a photo as evidence, but froze. What if she noticed? I'd be trapped. I shoved the insulated bag with the ice packs back toward her. "This isn't what I signed up for," I said, voice wavering. She finally turned, face drawn and pale, jaw set. She said, "It's gone through the right channels." I knew that wasn't true. Legitimate organ transport had to involve hospitals, ambulances, codes, escorts, never DoorDash. I took a step back, adrenaline making my legs tremble. "Look, don't do this," I said, heart pounding. My fingers hovered over the app's cancel button, but it wouldn't let me. The delivery was marked done. The nurse sighed, ran a hand through her hair, and whispered, "If you walk out now, you're part of it." Her tone held no threat, just cold fact. I stared at the bag, then at the door. I knew I had seconds to decide, walk out and risk that I'd never prove what happened, or stick around and possibly get roped in deeper. I tensed, cleared my throat, and asked, "Who else knows about this?" She looked away, voice low. "Just me and the courier before you. They handled it easily." My skin went tight. Before I could think, I grabbed the bag and made a break for the door. The nurse shouted something, clinical codes I'd never learned, but I didn't slow down. My sneakered feet crunched over the gravel as I slammed into the night air. I jumped into my car, doors locked before I could even turn around. Shaking, I hit help in the app and typed, "Package contained human organs for transplant, not food. Delivery canceled, please alert authorities." I slammed my phone onto the passenger seat, gripped the steering wheel, and stared at the dark building. No lights on inside, no movement. Just the hum of my engine and blood pounding in my ears. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I peeled out onto the main road. I pressed the gas, tires spinning, and didn't look back until I was halfway home. I drove past a police station and wanted to pull in, but I was still in uniform. I worried they'd arrest me for tampering or obstruction, or worse. I swallowed that panic and headed home, mind racing through worst-case scenarios. A missing person whose organs were next in line. A network of corrupt medical pros using jig apps to transport body parts. At my apartment, I tossed the insulated bag into a corner and backed away. I peeled off the uniform, washed my hands until they were raw, then scrubbed the bag with bleach. I opened every window, letting in fresh air. My phone lay on the kitchen island, screen lit with the unsent message to DoorDash. My hands hovered over send before I deleted it, afraid of logging something permanent. Instead, I called my best friend and told her I might quit. She laughed, assuming I was overreacting to a weird drop. I let her. I spent the next day replaying everything. I searched for Evergreen Clinic online. No results except a single forum post complaining about late-night noises in the woods. I found an unlisted number for a local hospital transplant coordinator and asked casually if they heard of a satellite clinic by that name. "Never," she said. "We use our own couriers." I didn't mention organs or DoorDash. I had installed the app that afternoon, texted my manager to quit, and deleted the clinic's address from my history. My roommate didn't push. She just nodded when I said I wanted day shifts at the cafe instead. I started sipping herbal tea at home, reading medical thriller novels to desensitize myself from reality. I watched hospital dramas on TV instead of crime docs. A week later, I checked the gravel road where Evergreen Clinic stood. The shack was gone, no sign of gravel drive, no crooked sign. Just pine trees and shadows. I checked Google Earth history, no record. It was as if the whole place never existed, like my own memory erasing itself. I still wake up some nights wondering who sent that nurse, where the organs came from, and who was waiting. I've delivered 100 times since, but every freezer bag and cold pack makes my skin crawl. Now, even carrying groceries into my apartment, I triple check what's inside before I step through the door. Because once you've seen a latex bag full of human organs on ice, you'd never look at a food delivery the same again. I've been stuck inside my apartment all week, binge watching shows and scrolling through old orders, eager for an excuse to get out. When the app pinged with a new bakery order on the edge of town, I jumped at it. I pictured friendly staff, a warm smell of fresh bread, maybe free samples. My bike rolled down cracked sidewalks as the sun dipped below rooftops, painting the sky pink. I felt that buzz of freedom you only get when you're about to leave behind four walls and a to-do list. The bakery looked shut down the second I arrived. A faded sign hung crooked above the door, letters half peeled, Sweet Crumb Bakery. The windows were dark, shelves empty except for dust. I rang the bell twice, expecting a glimpse of flour-dusted bakers or a chime of recorded music. Instead, a panel slid open at waist height, and a chubby hand handed me the bag. No faces, just that hand disappearing behind a curtain. I waited for an apology or an explanation, but got only silence. I dropped the bag into my messenger pouch, tapped completed on the app, and noticed next order's changing location. You know how routes shift when you finish early. Curious, I peeked inside the pouch. Beneath a bag of pastries was a mesh crate, small and stapled shut. The crate rattled like a fish tank without water, but whatever was inside made tiny thumps against the wire. I frowned. Not exactly bakery supplies. I unlatched the crate just enough to peek through the mesh. Inside, I saw a handful of faces. Kids, I realized. Their eyes were wide, tiny hands pressed against the metal bars. They wore hospital gowns, not bakery uniforms. Their faces were pale, their hair tangled. One little girl in the corner stared at me with lips parted, like she'd been too terrified to cry. My heart leaped into my throat. I yanked the pouch open and grabbed the crate, stuffing it above the pastries. The weight was heavier than I expected, dragging my shoulder down. I wheeled my bike to the side street, adrenaline crackling through my veins. My mind raced, who would traffic kids in custom crates under the guise of a ghost kitchen. I pictured convoys of unmarked vans, dispatchers sending orders to dashers like me, using insulated bags and obscure storefronts to hide the real cargo. As I pedaled away, I glanced over my shoulder. No one was watching. The bakery loomed empty, just a shell. I felt sick but tried to think straight. If I went straight to the cops, I'd have to explain how I ended up with a crate of kids in my backpack. I'd be the one with questions, not them. If I went home, I'd risk missing my window to hell. I biked to the nearest 24-hour cafe, parked outside, and set the crate on a picnic table. The kids' faces pressed against the mesh as I unzipped my jacket, pulled out my phone, and snapped a shot. I texted both 911 and my roommate. I need help, urgent. Kids locked in a crate under a bakery front. The cafe lights felt warm, safe, until a barista peeked at me from inside and asked if I was okay. I fumbled a smile, nodded, and she ducked back, probably thinking I was homeless or drunk. Minutes later, I saw flashing lights around the corner. 2 patrol cars, engines idling. I met them halfway, pointing back toward the bakery. The officers followed me to the cottage lane, guns drawn, and I explained the crate while my voice quivered. They radioed back up and told me to step back with my palms visible. In that moment, the mesh bars felt like steel walls of panic. What if they opened the crate and the kids were gone? Or worse, what if they were hurt? One officer crouched and pried open the crate with his flashlight. The kids stumbled out, blinking at the night sky, free from their wire prison but shaking like leaves. I watched tears run down their cheeks as another officer wrapped them in thermal blankets. I stood there, chest heaving, trying to swallow back relief and horror. The patrol cars called for more units, and a hostage rescue team showed up in black fatigues. They scoured the bakery building, kicking down the front door, finding nothing but broken tables and empty racks. While they enforced a perimeter, I'd overheard talk of shell companies, unregulated ghost kitchens, and a network using delivery apps to traffic victims. One detective said they'd seen similar setups in other cities: fake storefronts, hidden rooms, convoys that vanished at sunrise. I realized how deep this went, how many dashers could be next. The detectives took my statement till 3 in the morning. I described the crate, the bakery sign, the silent door panel. They thanked me for the tip, assured me the kids would be safe. I left on shaky legs, tears streaming because I'd done the right thing even though it meant facing questions, media, possible threats. I donated my shift earnings to a child rescue charity because it felt like the least I could do to help. I didn't delete the app that night, but I did change my settings. No more orders from unverified storefronts, always called before arriving, always asked to see the staff. I started carrying silicone handcuffs and a small flashlight, just in case. My friends joked that I acted like a spy, but I barely heard the punchlines. My eyes were still on that crate, on the kids' faces, on the empty bakery. Sleep was impossible. I kept waking up to the sound of crates rattling, kids calling help me in echoes. My phone buzzed with news alerts. It arrested 2 suspects connected to the bakery front and rescued 12 children across 3 towns. My photo had gone viral in local news reports. I stared at the headline: DoorDash driver breaks open trafficking ring. Behind that headline was me in pajamas, greasy-eyed and shaking, realizing I just saved lives. Now I treat every order like a checkpoint. Verify the business. Look for real staff. Use video call if needed. It's safe for sure, but I can't shake the thought that danger could be hiding behind any unassuming drop-off. Every time my bike rolls to a new place, my heart taps out a warning. I still love the freedom of the road and the buzz of a new delivery, but I'll never forget the night I discovered how easy it is to hide horrors under the smell of fresh pastries and a blinking neon open sign. I know now that kitchens should be warm, not a front for cages, I'll never look at bakery orders the same again. I pulled up to the glass tower at dusk, the city lights bouncing off the windows and turning the whole building into a shimmering monolith. All I knew was that I was delivering sushi to apartment 42B, and the pay was fat enough to cover my gas and a few extra dollars for room and later. I clicked accept, swung my backpack over my shoulder, and headed inside. The lobby was sleek, all marble floors and brass accents, a far cry from the dingy motels I usually avoided. I pressed the elevator button and watched the floor numbers climb, feeling that familiar buzz of satisfaction when a high-ticket order came through. The doors opened on the 42nd floor and a hallway stretched out, lined with recessed lights that cast golden pools on the carpet. I followed the numbers until I reached 42B, an ivory door with a gold plaque. No knocker, no doorbell, just a small slot. I slid the bag inside and tapped on the door. After a beat, it opened. A polished-looking guy in a tailored suit stood there, his hair slicked back, and he handed me an envelope instead of cash or tap to pay. The envelope was heavy, sealed with dark red wax stamped with an unknown crest. I frowned, glanced at the app. It showed paid already, and zipped my jacket pocket. The guy pointed toward the unit across the hall. He said something about hacking charges against certain officials and needed the drive moved without anyone noticing. I lifted the sushi bag to check under it and saw a slim USB drive taped to the inside flap. No lights, no logos. Just a blank, matte surface. My chest tightened. I'd read about whistleblowers using delivery folks to move sensitive data, but this was next level. I shrugged a casual nod, stepped away from the door, and dropped the drive into my inner pocket. I didn't want to draw attention. Someone in that building could be watching on a hidden camera. I slipped back down the hallway, adrenaline nudging me toward the stairwell. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. 3 floors down, I slipped into a service corridor behind the main elevators. It was dimly lit, pipes overhead, a single emergency exit sign glowing green. I pressed the envelope to my chest, USB drive burning under my hand, and looked both ways before ducking into a maintenance closet. Inside the closet, I leaned against the wall and exhaled. I unsealed the envelope. No sniff test needed to know it wasn't cash. It felt flat and thin and pulled out the drive. My fingers traced the edges, half expecting it to disappear in my hand. My mind raced. What did it contain? Video of elected officials taking bribes. Personal data that could topple careers. I knew that once I plugged it in somewhere, I'd be liable for everything on it. But I also realized someone had chosen me, an under-the-radar dasher, to smuggle this proof to a tabloid editor who paid in hush money. Everyone in that building was a potential blackmailer, a potential target. And here I was caught in the middle. I texted my roommate. Picked up some weird intel tonight. Need help. No reply. I cursed under my breath. People never answer late-night pings when they're not expecting them. I closed the envelope and slid it into my bag next to the sushi. My gut said run. Curiosity tied my feet together. I unzipped the pouch, dove in for the drive, and then snapped my phone's camera on. I aimed it at the drive and took a quick photo, metadata and timestamp ready. If anything happened, at least I'd have proof I didn't just banish it. I tapped the photo into a secret shared album with a trusted friend, then deleted it from my gallery. I climbed back up to the lobby, heart still rattling. I walked up to my bike, helmet dangling from my hand, and strapped on my pack. No flashing lights, no police tailing me, just the city noise and the click of my boots on the pavement. I mounted my bike, took a breath, and rolled toward home, mapping out a route that avoided university campuses and major intersections. I didn't want anyone to slide in behind me. At my apartment, I locked the door, tossed the bag on the kitchen counter, and cracked open the envelope again. The drive sat there like a ticking bomb. I made coffee, strong and black, and set my laptop on the table. My roommate stumbled out of her room, eyes bleary. I handed her the coffee and said, "I need your help with something serious." She blinked, took the cup, and slid onto the chair. I placed the drive and a plate of cold sushi between us. She leaned in, one eyebrow raised. I explained the handoff at 42B, the suit, the envelope sealed with wax. My words tumbled out. They're filming mid-delivery, trapping us as couriers for blackmail. I can't plug this in at home. I need someone outside the loop to vet it. She rubbed her temples, probably wishing she'd never signed on as my confidant. But I knew I could trust her. She's always been the cautious one in our duo. We decided to find a clean computer in a public library. No cameras, no keyloggers. We grabbed our jackets and headed out. The cool night air rushed past as we biked to the nearest branch downtown. Inside, we logged onto a guest terminal, cleared the history, and inserted the drive. The loading icon spun like a death sentence. We held our breath. Then a folder appeared. Videos, documents, audio. The first video file opened. Politician had taken cash from a lobbyist, recorded in a parking garage. My stomach lurched. We clicked another. Recorded audio of explosive conversations naming more targets. It was damning stuff, enough to ruin careers. We downloaded the files onto a secure thumb drive, zipped, and encrypted them with a password only we knew. We deleted everything off the public computer, restarted it, and logged out. No traces. We split up, me riding back to the apartment or looping home by bus. I thought about sending the files to a reporter friend, but worried about exposure. One wrong move and we'd vanish like ghosts. Instead, I reached for the encrypted drive, stashed it in a hidden case under my mattress. The next morning I waited for news. Nothing. My notifications were just brunch invites and social media pings. The money from the sushi order posted, tipping me more than usual. I bought a new lock for my bike and a little lockbox for my room. I changed my delivery preferences. No more high-rise apartments with no visible doorman or reception. I stuck to cafes and small restaurants where there were witnesses. Days passed without incident. I checked the shared album. No sign my photo was accessed. I messaged my reporter contact using a burner number. Big leak incoming. Let me know if you want exclusive. No reply yet. My roommate teased me about living in a spy novel. I laughed it off, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. I still deliver sushi, now with extra caution. Every handshake, every envelope swap. I check the other person's eyes for hesitation. I keep pepper spray in my jacket and a secondary burner phone ready. I know someone up there is pulling strings, someone who trusts couriers like me who move secrets in plain sight. And I know I'm in too deep now to back out. I keep asking myself, what did I agree to carry next? And am I willing to face the fallout? Because once you become a courier for someone's dark secrets, the only way out is knowing who holds the final cut. I was halfway through my shift when I noticed 3 different orders all pinging to the same GPS point, an abandoned factory on the edge of town. My stomach flipped as I stared at the address. Normally, I'd ignore anything that sounded sketchy, but these orders paid extra and the app kept pushing them to me, like a flashing billboard I couldn't turn off. I figured one of my fellow dashers must have messed up, and the system was auto-redirecting. It was almost dusk, and the sky had that bruised purple glow. I grabbed my bag, hit accept, and headed out, curiosity bubbling stronger than my usual mid-shift hunger. The factory sat behind a rusted chain-link fence topped with razor wire, weeds clawing through cracked pavement. A faded sign swung on one hinge, teasing industrial supplies in peeling letters. I parked my bike beside 3 cars idling on the shoulder. Other dashers like me, faces lit by phone screens, thumbs scrolling. We eyed each other warily. No one spoke, just the hum of engines and our phones ticking down before the next were out. It felt wrong in that immediate gut-level way that tells you something's off. I climbed over a gap in the fence and walked toward the building's side entrance, a door propped open by a chunk of concrete. Inside, dim lights revealed rows of pallets stacked with sealed crates. The smell was metallic like old batteries mixed with burnt plastic. A clipboard pinned to a pillar listed item codes and order numbers, matching the ones on our apps. I glanced at the others, who had already started unloading their delivery bags and filling them with electronics, tablets, smartphones, gaming consoles, all stolen, unmarked, moving through our hands like hot potatoes. My heart raced. I unzipped my insulated bag and hesitated before scooping up a stack of phones wrapped in bubble wrap. It was supposed to be sandwiches, sodas, snacks, anything edible. Instead, my bag felt stiff and heavy, loaded with items that could get me arrested. I looked around for an exit route as one of the hooded figures overseeing the operation barked to order numbers at us. No faces, just voices and flickers of flashlight beams across plywood walls. My fingers trembled, but I kept loading my bag. I was desperate to blend in until I figured out what to do. Then the man in the dark hoodie pointed at me. His tone slid from neutral to accusing in an instant. "You're slow," he said. "Move it." I dropped the last few phones in my bag and realized he thought I was part of the crew. I almost spoke up, told him I was there by mistake, but my gut shut down. I forced myself to nod, pretending to tighten the bag's drawstring. If I stalled, they'd notice I hadn't handled a real order like the rest of them. I risked staying to avoid suspicion, hoping to slip away later. Behind me, I heard footsteps running, a teenager like me pushing crates of expensive earbuds into his own bag. His face was pale in the yellow light, eyes wide. He caught my gaze and mouthed one word, "Run." My brain snapped awake. I lowered my voice to a whisper. "I'm out." I turned and bolted, weaving between pallets, listening to the clack of my sneakers on concrete. The other shouted and chased after me. My insulated bag slammed against my hip, the electronics rattling, sending my pulse into overdrive. I ducked through an open loading bay door and tumbled onto cracked gravel. The night air felt like a lifeline. I sprinted for the fence gap, adrenaline flooding me stronger than fear. My fingers scraped against rusted metal as I hoisted myself over, the weight of electronics in my bag threatening to pull me back. I landed awkwardly, pain shooting up my side, but I didn't stop. I vaulted the fence, limped to my bike, and gunned the engine. Tires spun off gravel, kicking up dust as I tore away. I didn't slow down until I hit the first stoplight, green of all things like some cosmic help. I parked on the curb, leaned over the handlebars, and gasped for air. My bag sat strapped to my back, its contents a reminder of how close I came to becoming a smuggler. I emptied it on the pavement, screens cracked, devices blinking with low battery warnings, serial numbers wiped. I stared at the pile, wondered if I should run to a phone booth and dial 911 without saying my name. But the fear of being tied to stolen property kept me frozen. I grabbed my phone and called my sister. She answered groggy, halfway through her evening show. I stuttered out the location, the factory, the crate codes. She listened and then told me to call the police myself. I hesitated, worried about being pinned for the goods in my bag. She yelled at me until I promised I'd call. I ditched my bag behind a trash bin, like that would hide evidence, and dialed 911 from across the street. When the dispatcher answered, I described the place in a steady voice, leaving out the fact that I had those devices in my arms. I gave the address and fled before they could ask for more. I rode home under empty streets, chest still hammering. The city lights blurred as I fought back tears. I deleted the orders from my history, uninstalled the app without a second thought, and shoved my bike into the shed. I paced my yard until my sister showed up in pajamas, flashlight in hand. She hunted down the bag, called the cops back to pick up the evidence. I watched officers cuff a guy crawling out of the factory's side window, praising me for the tip. I couldn't join their celebration, not after feeling those stolen phones rattling against my spine. That night, I sat in my room under a single lamp, going over every second. My hesitation, the cold crate steel, the teenager's warning. I thought about how easily I could have been in cuffs, how thumbprints on those screens could have tied me to the ring. I imagined them sending the next batch of dashers to meet me, the way the app had rerouted me in the first place. If not for their mistake, I might have ended up driving a van full of stolen goods. Since then, I only work with businesses I can see. Cats with open counters, restaurants that make you walk inside to pay. I check every address online, ignore drop-off notes that aren't at storefronts. I bought a helmet cam and record every delivery. Even still, every time I hear a phone ping, I flinch, wondering what I might be carrying next. The abandoned factory taught me that anyone can get pulled into something illegal, one click at a time. I learned the hard way that ignorance isn't an excuse, especially when your name and face end up in someone else's dirty game. Now I stick to safe zones, real kitchens, and bright lights. Anything to keep from walking into a trap I can't outrun. I never expected a food delivery to land me in the middle of something that felt like a covert war operation. But there I was, early evening light filtering through my windshield as I approached the old brick townhouse on Elmwood Street. The GPS blinked "arrived," but nothing about the place screamed "order here." No neon signs, no front porch light, just a heavy-looking door set into a narrow stoop. My shift had been slow, and I was itching for an easy draw. Instead, I got something I couldn't have planned for. I parked down the block, double-checked the address, and grabbed the bag. My phone buzzed a reminder that I had past due assignments, but I shrugged it off. The door swung open before I could knock. A man in dark tactical gear stood there, expression unreadable under a mesh face covering. He gestured me inside without a word. I hesitated, knowing I wasn't supposed to enter private homes, but his hand hovered over his hip as if he might draw something, so I stepped through. The hallway was narrow and dim, lit by a single bulb that flickered. I noticed cameras in each corner, their lenses tracking my every move. Concrete walls, no carpet, no pictures, just a bare corridor leading to a back room. My heart kicked in. I set the bag on a metal table, testing how heavy it felt. He nodded once, and another figure emerged from the shadows to scan an ID badge I didn't know existed. The guy in gear snapped a photo of my uniform with his phone, then swapped it for a laminated card that flashed, "AUTHRISE D operator." I blinked. "I'm just here with dinner," I said, voice shaky. He ignored me, tapping the badge on a scanner beside the stacked cardboard boxes. A green light flashed, and the door in front of me clicked open like a safe. Inside, dim red lights cast long shadows over crates marked with dates and names. Shipping manifests taped to the crates bore rows of civilians' names and street addresses. I realized this wasn't food storage. It was a registry, a list of pickups, schedules, and drop-offs. An extremist cell using real-time delivery data to coordinate safe houses across the city. My mind raced. Each crate looked identical, each manifest row a human being they were expecting to move. They'd scanned my badge and given me the manifest for tonight's round. I glanced down at the file in my hand. Names, dates of birth, and family ties. The delivery app had become their mapping tool. Every dasher unwittingly feeding data. They knew where we'd go, how fast we'd arrive, and which routes we'd take. And here I was the newest member of their network. I swallowed hard. My palms were slick against the bag's straps. "I don't know how I got pulled into this," I said. The man in gear lifted his head slowly, eyes hard. He said, "You're part of the team now. We trust you." Trust me? I barely trusted myself. I backed away, fumbling for a way out, but the red light snapped off behind me, and the door clicked shut. I felt the metal tables edge against my back as I scanned the crates. One row listed a group of activists supposed to meet at church basement. Another crate held a manifest of defectors needing relocation. They were playing moves for people in danger, but who decided who needed moving and why? And if they had dasher data, could they track anyone who got cold feet? He stepped closer and pointed at the manifest in my hand. "Bring the next crate to the safe house at 7th and Pine. That's your new drop." He pocketed my uniform badge and tapped a code into the scanner, copying the delivery slot onto a new manifest. He handed it back with a nod. Quitting wasn't an option. I'd been flagged. My name was in the system. My mind spun. I had two choices: follow orders and hope the people inside were as innocent as they claimed, or run and risk anyone who knew my schedule finding me. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breath. My phone lay in my pocket, thumb hovering over 911, but the walls had ears. I dragged the crate, light enough for one person but awkward, toward the door. The man in gear opened it, and I stepped back into the hallway. He handed me a manifest, same format, same cold rows of names. I scanned it like I'd scanned every drop. Pizza boxes, burritos, salads. But this time the contents were human lives, coded logistics. Outside, another operative guided me to an unmarked van, engine idling. I loaded the crate into the back. Two more crates sat stacked, each tagged for separate locations. They expected me to run 3 stops in under an hour. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the manifest. I slid behind the wheel, doors locked, and stared at the road. If I sped off, they'd use my phone's GPS to track me. If I drove the route, I'd be part of their network. My pulse hammered. I prayed they slowed me down for traffic lights or road work. I flicked on the radio and let the static drown out my racing thoughts. We moved fast. The van's tinted windows gave me a view of suburban streets, churches, apartment complexes. Each stop had an operative waiting. Crates slid through side doors. No questions, just rushed nods. I kept to the road like any normal delivery, but I felt every eye on me. I counted down stops, 2 more to go. Then I'd have to circle back. But why circle back? If I stalled, maybe they'd cancel my badge scan and leave me alone. After the second drop, I pulled into a gas station. I paused, engine idling, and fumbled with my phone. "Hey, I think there's a fire drill." I whispered into the phone to my roommate. "Can you call 911 and say I'm in danger?" She answered right away, worry in her voice. I gave her the address to the van's description and begged her not to linger. I pressed the call button, but the moment the cop's voice said, "What is your emergency?" I hung up. I couldn't risk them tracing my call. I killed time at the pump, pretending to fill the tank, checking over my shoulder. The sun dipped lower, street lamps flickered on. I checked the manifest again. Only one crate left, destined for a warehouse near an industrial park. After that, maybe I could ditch the manifest in a dumpster, drop the uniforms, and vanish. They'd have no way to track me once I lost the badge. The last stop was cleaner, newer buildings, security cameras, a keypad entry. I set the crate down and grabbed the manifest, half expecting to be shown in on hidden cameras. A door clicked open, and I shoved the crate inside. Someone whispered, "Thank you," before the door locked behind me. Just a cold corridor lit by emergency lights. I slammed the van door shut, climbed in, and turned off the engine. I sat there for what felt like forever, heartbeat thudding, waiting to see if anyone came after me. No footsteps, no headlights. I yanked the manifest into pieces, tossed them out the window as I drove away. Each page fluttered behind me like confetti. I veered off my usual route, turned down side streets, then onto a highway. I didn't stop until I hit the edge of town. Dawn was close. I had crude directions to a safe spot for my roommate, a friend's empty office downtown. I pulled in, doors locked, and called her. She handed me the phone for 911, and I stayed on the line while they traced the van's last signal and the crate's destinations. I gave them everything I knew, timestamps, addresses, and my own name. It felt like jumping off a cliff. At least I'd reported the crime. They told me to stay put until an officer arrived. I sat for 2 hours, staring at a blank wall, every siren outside making me tense. When they finally showed up, they brightened the room with flashlights and questions. I answered all of them, even about a phantom badge scan and a stolen uniform. They took notes, promised to investigate the cell. I handed over my phone, my messages, and even the scraps of manifest I'd managed to save in my pocket. Now I'm off the app, done with gigs I thought were just pizza runs. I gave my uniform away and deleted every trace. I sleep with the TV on and lock every door twice. I still see shadows at the edge of my vision, cameras behind every alley. I know they'll look for me in the system, but for once I'm glad I don't belong to it anymore. I traded my usual hustle for something bigger, turning in a network that could have swallowed me whole. And for the first time in weeks, I don't feel I am part of anyone's mission but my own. I pulled up to the steel gates of Ridgeview Correctional Facility just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind barbed wire fences. The guard tower spotlight swung in a slow arc, cutting through the dusty yard where families waved across chain-link fences. I delivered to prisons before, always the same routine, handed off the food bag to the officer at the gate, sign a log, and be on my way. This time, though, when I reached for the lunch sack they handed me, something inside fell off. The bag was heavier than usual. I glanced at the name tag. Johnson J. I ducked under the swing gate and walked toward the officer by the guardhouse. He nodded without a word and waved me past. I carried the bag into the yard entrance, where the metal detector beeped and the deputy patted me down. I tried to keep my cool. It was busy, inmates queued to see loved ones, dozens of faces pressed against fences. I headed toward the waiting room, kept the bag at my side, and rehearsed my greeting. In the visitor lobby, I set the bag on a metal bench and stepped around it to check the order slip. The usual cheeseburger combo, chips, soda. I peeled back the top of the sack and saw the wrapped burger and fries, but beneath them was a pile of brown-wrapped envelopes sealed with tape. At first, I thought they were napkins or extra utensils, but when I pulled one out, I saw they were letters, handwritten, folded small, all sealed tight. No return addresses, just block letters. Inmate J. Johnson. My heart skipped. I knew contraband letters were a big deal. They could carry coded messages. I slid one open with the flap of a soda can and saw lines of cramped writing, words strummed together like riddles. Mentions of Midnight Collection, Blue Van, corner of 5th and Elm, and references to numbers that didn't fit into any phone number format. My skin crawled. This wasn't personal mail, it was instructions. I counted at least 20 letters, each 5 pages long, scribbled on cheap paper. I sat there, hands shaking, staring at the letters while families hugged and inmates paced the yard beyond the glass partition. I thought about the inmates I'd seen. Some looked harmless, others I wouldn't cross on the street. But this G. Johnson could be part of a prison gang orchestrating crimes outside. I imagined cops reading these letters and realizing they'd missed planned robberies or worse. I fumbled my phone, thumb hovering over 911 ready to call it in. But then I thought if I report it, that inmate's crew might retaliate. I'd be a marked dasher, a target every time I showed up. I sealed the letter again, tucked it back under the burger wrapper, and continued toward the door where visitors' check-in signs pointed me out. The guard at the exit scanned my order slip and didn't glance at the bag's contents. I walked out, threw the bag into the back of my car, and sat there for a moment as the afternoon turned to twilight. The idea of doing nothing made my palms sweat. The thought of calling local police felt safer than calling 911, but that meant driving to a precinct, risking the letters being traced back to me. I took a deep breath and drove to a quiet spot several miles away, pulling into a deserted church parking lot. I got out, grabbed the bag, and peeled back the top again. I spread the letters on the trunk of my car and read more. One letter detailed how to coordinate cell phones smuggled inside tortilla wraps. Another laid out intricate codes for signaling drops at convenience stores. Another listed names, real names of people on the outside, likely gang members waiting for orders. It was all too clear. These weren't personal letters. They were a playbook. I snapped photos of a few pages with my burner phone, careful not to capture any of my fingerprints or reflection. I sent the images to an encrypted email I'd set up for emergencies long ago when I joked about being prepared for disasters. And it felt like my lifeline. I typed a brief note. Suspicious letters from prison delivery. Possible gang ops. Need investigation. I hit send, then deleted the drafts and emptied my phone's trash. If anyone traced it, they'd only see I emailed myself. My chest tightened. I wondered if I should hand over the physical letters, but by now the risk of carrying them felt huge. They'd linked me to prison records. I gathered them into the bag again, tossed them under a pile of napkins, and drove home. On the way out, my roommate asked me why my hands were trembling. I texted her, "Tough shift. Need tea." She sent a heart emoji and an offer to talk later. I kept silent about the letters because I didn't want anyone outside the investigation freaking out. At home, I locked the door, closed the blinds, and peeled open another letter. This time I read the signature, Stay Low Brothers. Jay, I realized I knew his name. Jackson J. Johnson, a lifer rumored to run a crew from behind bars. He was using DoorDash deliveries to funnel his instructions to associates. I felt like I'd been living in a bubble. Somehow the app had plugged me straight into the underworld. I paced my apartment, trying to decide my next move. The email had gone through, but I had no idea who, if anyone, was reading it. I considered taking the letters to the detective precinct, but I worried about surveillance cameras in the station identifying me. I could burn them, but then I'd lose evidence. I finally settled on zipping them into a sealed envelope labeled evidence, locking it in my trunk, and driving to the police station in person. Wearing sunglasses, hat pulled low, I wanted to guarantee they'd see the letters without delay. The next morning, I booked a 9 a.m. with non-emergency dispatch and arrived at the precinct in commuter clothes. I kept my head down as I pushed the elevator button and walked into records. The desk sergeant looked at me like I had a fake badge. I flashed my Dasher ID, told him I had evidence of gang instructions in prison mail. He raised an eyebrow, but took the envelope. I watched through a CCTV camera above the reception desk as he handed it to a detective. I felt my jaw unclench. The detective emerged minutes later, asking me to follow him into an interview room. He was mid-30s, calm, professional. I told him everything. How I found the letters, what they said, who Jackson Johnson was. I handed in my phone with the encrypted email and showed the transaction records proving I'd picked up the meal at jail. He nodded, took notes, and said he'd have an officer come get the physical letters. He also said they'd call me if they needed anything else. It felt like the start of something, like maybe I'd done the right thing after all. Driving home, I realized I'd been carrying those letters for over 24 hours, paranoid every mile. I'd chosen caution over silence, and the weight lifted off my chest. At my apartment, I slept with the windows open for the first time in a week. Our roommate asked if it was safe to watch my door now, and I told her I'd handle it. That night, news alerts popped up about a sting at Ridgeview. Local police raids, arrests of suspected gang associates passing out coded messages. Jackson Johnson's crew had been disrupted, and the officers credited an anonymous tip from someone embedded in courier services. I didn't correct them. I'd asked to stay anonymous. But I smiled because I knew I'd made the call that set it off. I traded fear for action, and maybe stopped crimes that could have hurt innocent people. And every time I drive by a prison now, I remember that unless we look closely, some horrors hide in plain sight. It felt like any other Friday night shift when I rolled up to the gated entrance of Crestwood Estates. My headlights cut through the early evening gloom, revealing perfectly trimmed hedges and a security kiosk with a bored guard barely glancing up from his phone. I'd done deliveries to fancy neighborhoods before, but something about this place, the way the iron gate clicked open at exactly the same spot every time, gave me a weird itch in my gut. I shrugged it off as exhaustion and swung into the circular drive of a stucco house that looked more like a vacation villa than a regular home. I parked under a sculpted magnolia tree and pulled the insulated bag over my shoulder. My phone buzzed with the address and a note. Family dinner. Thank you. I hit start delivery and marched up the stone steps, bracing myself for a polite wave and maybe a tip. When the double doors opened, I felt a rush of warm air scented with something like grilled chicken and rosemary. I set the containers on a marble island in the bright kitchen and glanced around. Marble floors, brass fixtures, a wine fridge stocked with Ceylon bottles. No one appeared, but the door behind me swung almost closed on its own. I reached into the bag to confirm the order, and that's when I noticed a second package tucked beneath the foil-wrapped trays. It was a small plain box sealed with brown tape and no label or frosting or anything hinting at food. My heart flipped. I pulled it out and squinted at it under those chandelier lights. No brand name, no instructions, just a taped scene that begged to be opened. Curiosity got the better of me. I peeled back a corner of tape, slid the lid off, and froze. Inside were stacks of folded papers, each the size of a ballot, thick and crisp white. I flipped one over and saw checkboxes for candidates in the upcoming city council election. Some were filled in, others blank. I peeled back another sheet and realized they were already marked. Someone had printed and completed dozens of ballots, ready to slip into drop boxes or ballot boxes during early voting. My stomach dropped. I'd become a courier for what had to be a voter manipulation scheme, and I hadn't even realized it until my fingers felt the weight of that little box. My first impulse was to shove everything back and hope nobody noticed. But the moment I tried, the front door clicked shut somewhere behind me, and I spun around. No footsteps, no voices, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I sank onto a stool, palms slick on the marble, and stared at the ballots. Whoever had ordered this dinner was banking on me delivering more than garlic bread. They thought I'd walk in, nod at a tip jar, and walk right back out with an extra package in hand. No questions asked. I took a deep breath, counted to 10, and decided I couldn't pretend this didn't happen. I piled the ballots back into the box, taped it closed with bits of leftover tape on the package, and slipped it back under the food trays. Then I grabbed my phone and typed a note into the delivery app's issues section. Found suspicious sealed box under order. Please advise. The app thinged back, will review your report. Always that vague line. No urgent callback, no check-in. Just me in the box and a kitchen filled with silent cameras I hadn't noticed before. Keeping my eyes on the tiled floor, I picked up the trays and headed for the front door. I didn't even wait for it to open. I pushed it with my elbow and stepped onto the porch. The evening air felt cooler, like I just crossed a line. I locked eyes with the guard at the gate as he took my ID badge number. His face didn't change. I handed back the card, walked to my car, and tossed the bag into the backseat. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even buckle my seatbelt right away. I sat there for a solid minute, staring at the steering wheel. My mind raced through how easy it had been. Slip a box under a meal, rely on dashers to handle it, and nobody thinks twice. I pictured them using my uniform, my face, my delivery history to move ballots around like pizza slices. That meant the next voter drop-off could happen while I was pumping gas, while I was grabbing coffee, while I was sitting in my car, phone in hand, thinking about my next stop. I finally buckled in, locked the doors, and started the engine. I didn't feel like finishing the shift, like going back to the anonymity of app deliveries. I felt exposed. My phone buzzed with another ping, an order only 2 streets over, cheap sushi, nothing fancy. I ignored it, deleted the app icon, and slumped back in the seat. But I couldn't leave it alone. That little box was still sitting under the seats, tapping away at my conscience. I pulled over a block away, slid out of the car, and grabbed it. I took out my pocket knife, sliced through the tape again, and pulled out the ballots. The printing was crisp, professional grade. The markings were neat, as if someone had trained their hand for weeks. I counted at least 50 ballots, each one ready to be dropped in anonymously. I realized if I took these to the election office, they'd trace them back to me, maybe think I was the guilty party. So I needed a plan. I looked around for a mailbox, but all I saw were street signs and a dog walker across the road. I stepped into a strip mall and found a convenience store. I opened the box again, ripped the ballots in half, and folded them tiny, until they looked like burnt matchsticks. I tossed them into the trash bin outside, part of me thinking they'd be burned for me eventually, but at least they'd be dispersed. Trash rustled as my bits of ballots tumbled inside. I backed away, took a deep breath, and walked back to my car. The city lights overhead felt too bright, too revealing. I tossed the empty box in the passenger seat and drove home through quiet side streets, avoiding main roads. I deleted the note in the delivery app so there'd be no record of my report. If anyone asked, I'd say I found nothing and moved on. That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment. The kitchen lights, the guard's blank stare, a hush when I pushed the door. I wondered how many other dashers had carried boxes like mine, how many ballots were already in drop boxes by the time I shredded mine. I thought about voting booths, civic duty, and how someone could weaponize an app I used for extra cash. Morning came too soon. I uninstalled and reinstalled the app, left it off my home screen. I stuck to coffee shops and pizza counters, places where you hand over cash or tap a card in plain sight. I keep a small camera keychain on my bag now, ready to record any odd handoffs. My deliveries feel different these days. Every ring, every door, every doorstep seems like a potential front for something I never signed up to smuggle. And I can't shake the idea that on that same road, someone else will pick up dinner, find a sealed box, and wonder what they're carrying. Maybe they'll do what I did. Maybe they won't. But I know how easy it was, and I know every shift, every ping, carries the chance that my next delivery could be more than a meal. I'd been cooped up in my cramped apartment all morning, scrolling through memes and dodging assignment deadlines when the DoorDash app finally buzzed with something interesting. A lunch order for Innovex Labs down in the old warehouse district. The pay was solid and I figured it'd be quick. Grab sandwiches from the deli, head over, drop off, grab my next ping. I jumped on my bike, racing past shuttered storefronts and graffiti-tagged walls, until I rolled up to a nondescript building with tinted windows and no sign except a peeling sticker on the glass that read, Innovex. My stomach twinged with excitement at a non-chain delivery and zero clue what this place actually did. I locked my bike to a corroded rail and carried the bag inside. The lobby was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. A receptionist's desk sat empty, paperwork strewn about, an employee ID card dangling from a lanyard, coffee cups half empty. I rang the bell on the counter, glanced around for cameras, and tapped the screen on my phone to confirm the draw. 30 seconds later, a door clicked open behind me, and I stepped into what looked like a break room, plastic chairs, a fridge covered in cartoon magnets, and a single table piled with takeout containers. I thought, cool, they use this area for lunch. I set the bag down and reached for the sandwiches when something caught my eye through a half-open door to the side. Curiosity nudged me around the corner into a long hallway line of lab doors. Behind a frosted window, I saw stainless steel racks holding rows of clear plastic boxes. My pulse jumped. The boxes were labeled pathogen test samples, each sealed with biohazard stickers and dates. I blinked, stared again, and realized the break room was just a facade. This place was running tests on who knows what. I felt my palms sweat as I leaned closer to read the labels. Batch 17C, Batch 17D, Virus Strain A02. My stomach flip-flopped. I'd delivered to medical offices before, but never something that looked like a mini CDC tucked behind a fake kitchen area. The door squeaked behind me. I jumped, heart pounding, and saw a guy in a hazmat suit step into the hallway. He locked eyes with me through the inflatable plastic visor and wordlessly pointed toward the break room table. I swallowed. I picked up the sandwiches and the quesadillas wrapped in foil, trying to look casual, but the bag felt suddenly heavy. As I turned to leave, I noticed him ducking back into a side lab and re-emerging with a small cooler clacking across the floor. He loaded one of the vials labeled experimental virus into my insulated bag without a word, zipped it shut, and vanished through another door. I froze for a second, the cool air on my back, my breath catching. There was my bag, now holding a vial of who knows what. My hand closed over the zipper, fingers shaking. I wanted to drop the bag, run out, text DoorDash support. But the reality was I was trapped inside this strange lab, uniformed and recognized. If I bolted, it tracked me down. If I stayed, I was carrying a vial of experimental virus in my bag. I muttered a silent curse, shoved the bag against my side, and headed back to the break room door because that's where I knew the exit was. I stuck to the walls, scanning for cameras. Every corner felt like it housed a lens. I passed racks of pipettes and centrifuges humming in glass enclosed rooms, then finally cracked the break room door and slipped back into the fake lunch area. I tapped my phone to confirm delivery. Innovex Labs, break room. It registered as usual. I felt like a ghost, invisible and used. Then I turned and walked out the door, trying to act normal as I stepped into the parking lot. My bike looked lonely, chain rattling in the breeze. I swung the bag over my shoulder and pedaled off without looking back. My heart was still hammering when I hit the main road. I pulled into a cafe, locked my bike, and set the bag on a table. I unzipped it, pulling out the cooler with the vial. The label glowed under the fluorescent lamp. Experimental virus, handled with care. My breath caught. I stared at it for long moments, thinking of headlines. Courier exposed to deadly virus, and realized I'd just agreed to carry disease samples in the name of lunch delivery. I pictured that hazmat guy watching me, maybe noting the timestamp on my uniform. He tested me as much as the virus. I wanted to dump it in the trash, run for the hills, but then I realized what that virus could do in the wrong hands. I needed to report this, but how? Calling 911 risked the cops finding me with that cooler. I needed someone official but discreet. I finished my coffee, texted an anonymous tip to the local health department's hotline. I'm a courier. I delivered an experimental virus vial to Innovex Labs break room. Handled discreetly. Then I deleted the message, closed the app tab, and looked around the cafe. Nobody gave me a second glance. My fingers still shook as I wrapped the cooler in a plastic bag and tossed it into a dumpster behind the cafe. I watched it fall, thunk, and felt a weird relief. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe the health inspectors would pick up the pieces. I biked home under a gloomy sky that felt too heavy, sweat drying on my palms. On the way, I flashed back to how easy it was for them to slip the vial in, like handing off ketchup packets. It sent chills down my spine, realizing how little background the app or I had on the places I delivered to. At home, I scrubbed my bag with bleach, tossed my uniform in the wash, and stripped every pocket. I showered twice, just in case. That night, I barely slept, dreaming of petri dishes and gas masks. When dawn cracked, I called in sick. I opened my laptop to health department emails, nothing yet. I checked news feeds, worried about a new outbreak, maybe one trace back to a courier. I couldn't shake the dread. I didn't delete the app, but I cleared my delivery history for Innovex Labs. I set my preferences to public storefronts only. No more mysterious break rooms. I even started taking notes on every drop-off spot, addresses, photos, anything to keep track. I told a couple of friends about it, omitting the veal detail, just saying I delivered to a laboratory that freaked me out. They stared at me like I'd lost it, but I know what I saw. Weeks later, I still dodge that warehouse district. Every time I hear a bike chain rattle, I scan for hazmat suits. Every time the app pings a mystery place, I pause, sweat pooling in my palms. I love the freedom of the gig, but now I know how easily it can turn into a delivery of doom. And every time I peel open foil from a sandwich, I remember the day I found experimental virus mixed in with the chips, and I remind myself, next time, I'm asking questions first. Weeks later, I still dodge that warehouse district. Every time I hear a bike chain rattle, I scan for hazmat suits. Every time the app pings a mystery place, I pause, sweat pooling in my palms. I love the freedom of the gig, but now I know how easily it can turn into a delivery of doom. And every time I peel open foil from a sandwich, I remember the day I found experimental virus mixed in with the chips, and I remind myself, next time I'm asking questions first. It was one of those evenings when the sky looked like spilled ink and my phone buzzed with a new order that broke the monotony. A big steak dinner for a place called Cedar Ridge Ranch, 2 hours out of town. I'd never been that far for a delivery, but the extra cash tempted me. I hopped on my bike with my backpack slung over one shoulder and pedaled past cornfields and rusted fences until I rolled up to a wooden gate marked Cedar Ridge. A guard in a truck waved me in, and I steered into a yard dotted with oil lamps, thinking I was in for a quiet drop-off under the stars. The main house looked like a log cabin on steroids, towering beams, plaid curtains, and antlers mounted over the porch. I weighed the insulated bag in my hand, imagining a friendly rancher tipping me for a juicy steak. I rang the bell and it shifted from foot to foot. The door creaked open and a woman handed me a leather satchel instead of money. No words, just a slight nod, like this happened every night. Something about that motion gave me pause, but I shrugged, handed over the bag, and took the satchel in return. I zipped it open and blinked at a thick ledger, pages bound in oil-stained leather. I thought it might be a guest book until I flipped it over and saw handwritten columns. Dates, ring numbers, names of dogs, payouts and cash, all for events labeled Match A, Match B, Semifinal, Championship. My heart twisted. I heard rumors of underground dogfighting, but I'd never expected to come face to face with it on a delivery. I zipped the satchel closed, bag still slung over my shoulder, and backed toward the door. Something in the air felt like tension unleashed. Dogs barking somewhere behind me, but not happily. My step quickened as I walked back to my bike. I snapped a photo of the gate sign with my phone, then another of the satchel's leather clasp. I texted my roommate, "We need to talk, right now." No reply. I slid out of the bike seat and pedaled off, eyes on the ledger inside my backpack. The road back felt longer, every tree line hiding wild eyes. I tried to stay calm, but the satchel's weight felt like I was carrying someone else's guilt. When I hit a street lamp 2 miles from the ranch, I stopped. The sky had gone completely dark. I set the satchel on the ground, flipped it open, and stared at the pages again. There were entries for 3 states, dates spanning 6 months, and names I didn't recognize. I realized this ranch was a hub, shipping dogs, coordinating fights, taking bets. Those pairs of animals trained to attack each other like gladiators, they were real. The cash payouts were enough to cover rent for months, but the cruelty made my stomach churn. My phone buzzed, my roommate finally texting back. She asked if I was okay. I tapped out a quick, "Found something. Can't talk. Need a plan." I zipped the satchel, lifted it into my backpack, and carried on toward home. The silence on the empty road felt oppressive, like each mile stretched a knot tighter in my chest. By the time I reached my apartment building, I knew I had to turn this in. But how? If I dragged that satchel to the police station, they'd ask how I got it. If I burned it, I'd lose proof. If I left it somewhere, who'd find it? I walked up 3 flights of stairs, set the satchel on my coffee table, and stared at it under my lamp. I paced, mind awash with possibilities. I finally grabbed my laptop and searched local animal control numbers, wrote down the 24-hour tip line, and made a voice memo. Cedar Ridge Ranch, underground dogfighting. I have ledger details and photos. I saved it, deleted the file from my main folder, and left the memo on my desktop. I needed someone official who'd act without asking for my name. Next morning, I packed the satchel, ledger photos, my bike helmet, and drove to the animal control office. I parked around back to avoid the cameras out front and slipped inside with my backpack pressed against my chest. The receptionist gave me a blank look when I said I had evidence of dogfighting. I shoved the satchel onto the counter. She went pale, called a supervisor, and told me to wait. I stepped outside for fresh air, heart pounding. 20 minutes later, a pair of officers came out. They thanked me, took my statement, anonymous, I said, and promised to raid Cedar Ridge under cover of darkness. They asked how I got the ledger. I said it was a tip. I found it on a delivery. They nodded, praised me for coming forward, and warned me to stay away from the ranch. I drove home in a daze, thinking about those dogs, trained to pain, passed around like commodities. Back in my apartment, I scrubbed my bag and helmet until they nearly disintegrated. I threw out the satchel's cardboard box and recycled the packing paper. I kept a single photo on my phone, a shot of the ledger's header with Cedar Ridge Ranch scrawled in ink. It was my reminder of how quickly an ordinary delivery could slam you into something dark. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart still fluttering. I wondered if the raid succeeded, if any dogs got out alive. I checked the news the next morning. No headline yet. Maybe it takes time to bust a ring. I texted my roommate. All good here. Just tired. She sent back a thumbs up. I smiled weakly, knowing she'd never guess why. Deliveries feel different now. Every time I roll up to a remote drive or a sketchy address, I check the bushes for cages or crates. I keep my phone at the ready to snap evidence to call help. I still need the money, but I don't trust any order without a storefront in daylight. Cedar Ridge taught me that a simple delivery could drag me across state lines into a dogfighting circuit that traded in blood and cash. And I'll never forget that ledger, taped shut in a leather satchel, its pages promising horrors I'd rather leave on that dirt road. I thought I'd seen every weird corner of the city on my late night runs, but that Saturday shift took me farther than I'd ever gone. My phone pinged with the drop, Motel 9, Room 4. I delivered to Motel 4, but this one's neon vacancy sign was flickering like a warning. The GPS led me down a stretch of cracked pavement, past boarded up storefronts and dead-end alleys. It was the kind of place you didn't stop if your car broke down. I checked the time, 2:17 a.m., and shrugged off the itch at the back of my neck. Extra cash was extra cash. When I pulled into the motel parking lot, the orange street lamp overhead buzzed and cast a sickly glow on peeling paint and rusted railings. I grabbed the bag and tiptoed across the grass that was more dirt than green. The door to room 4 was slightly ajar, light spilling out in a narrow wedge. I knocked anyway, said food delivery under my breath, then pushed the door open. Inside, shadows tangled around a beat-up coffee table and a torn sofa. I stepped in and set the bag down on a ripped floral bedspread. No one answered, so I checked my phone's map to make sure I was in the right place. That's when a movement near the dresser caught my eye. A man in a suit emerged from behind a hanging coat, face pale and haggard. He didn't reach for cash or swipe a card. Instead, he held out a passport and a thick envelope. The passport photo was of a child, barely 6 or 7, with wide eyes staring back. The cover was stamped with another country's emblem. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. In the envelope was a transit ticket, a flight leaving in 2 hours, connecting flights, a plane ride that would carry the kid halfway across the world. My first thought was that I'd misread everything. Maybe the kid was an orphan being flown to a new foster family. But the ticket said undisclosed guardian and was issued by a suspicious-looking agency with no website. I lifted the passport and saw worn edges, as if it had passed through many hands. I flipped through the pages, no stamps except the one for tonight's flight. The man handed me the envelope and said nothing. His eyes seemed to flicker with something desperate, but I couldn't tell if he was pleading or threatening. My mind raced. I pictured headlines. Dasher aids in child trafficking ring. I imagined every cop in the county showing up asking questions. I looked at the bag of food like it was an accomplice in this mess. The man's hand hovered over the unzipped pocket where I'd stashed my delivery receipts. I felt a cold sweat on my back and realized I was holding a passport for a kidnapped kid. And this suit, who knew if he was a rescuer or a culprit, expected me to move this child across borders under my humble courier badge. I zipped the bag shut, backed up a step, and tried to catch a breath. My phone screen glowed with the app's delivered button, but I knew clicking it would admit I'd completed something I never agreed to. I considered tossing the passport back and taking off, but the man's expression hardened. He slid a black folder across the coffee table, photographs of the same child in different outfits in different cities, under different names. It clicked. This was a trafficking operation using fake identities. They'd harnessed the casual cover of a food delivery to move the kid unnoticed. I glanced at the door, calculated angles in my head. If I bolted, I risked him chasing me down the hallway or my bag being left behind with the kid's documents. I needed a plan. I squatted to pick up the food bag, pulled out my phone, and pretended to type a note. He leaned in, eyes flicking between my hands and the passport. I held his gaze for a moment, then tapped notes in the app and typed, Found additional documents in bag under order, please advise. It looked real enough to the app's generic response system. While I waited for the auto-reply, which would be nothing more than "thanks, we'll review," I slid the passport and envelope into my backpack's hidden pocket. The man watched, silent, as I stuffed the kid's papers inside. The neon light outside the window flickered. I thought of calling 911. But if I did, the dispatcher would want specifics. His name, my location, right in front of him. I imagined him grabbing the envelopes back, or worse. So I closed the app, locked my phone, and stood up, brushing past him as if I belonged. That's the moment I realized they'd planned for me to be seen, recorded on any camera in the hall, then blink and ride out into the night like a phantom. With my bike locked to the railing, I pedaled like I was being chased. Sweat dripped down my temples, my legs burned and pumped with adrenaline. I didn't stop until the motel was a distant smear of orange light behind me. Only then did I dare to glance into my backpack, feeling the envelope's stiff edges like a secret I couldn't shake. I went home and paced my living room. My phone buzzed with the app's generic acknowledgement. "We've received your note and will follow up." I deleted it instantly. I thought about turning in the passport to immigration authorities, but the odds of them tracing it back to the kid's real identity before damage was done felt slim. I decided to take the envelope straight to the local police station, but that meant I'd have to walk in with evidence of a crime and explain how I got it. Instead, I looked up a child advocacy hotline, one of those shadowy nonprofits that worked with anti-trafficking task forces. I called their anonymous tip line, described the motel, the man in the suit, the passport, and flight ticket. I heard a sigh of relief on the other end. A staffer saying they'd coordinate with law enforcement quietly, keep my identity protected. I erased call logs and texts, replaced my delivery bag with an old backpack, and sank onto the sofa tired and rattled. The next morning I watched news updates. Child safe after rescue at hidden motel operation. They credited an anonymous tip from a concerned courier. I didn't feel proud. I felt drained, like I'd run a marathon in the dark. Delivering food always felt like simple work until it became something darker, something I'd carry in my pockets and thoughts for weeks. I'm back on the app now, but I avoid motel orders. I stick to cafes and restaurants with signage around who I'm handing food to. Every ping that says "drop off" in a private room makes me pause and check my bag twice. I learned the hard way that it only takes one order in the dead of night to turn a harmless gig into a fight to save a child. And I'll never forget the weight of that passport in my hand, or the sound of the envelope rustling as I stuffed it into my pack and pedaled away into the dark. The first thing I noticed about 52B was the view, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the skyline like a movie set. It was almost sunset when I wheeled my bike into the valid area of the Argent Tower. The building so new its official plaque still gleamed. I'd never had a delivery above the 20th floor, let alone the 52nd. My app pinged Isabella Marino with a generous tip amount, so I strapped on the insulated bag and joined the button-pressed elevator crowd. Everyone looked polished, like they lived in magazines. When the doors opened on 52, the carpet was thick and pale gray, and the hallway lights felt warmer than any residential corridor I'd seen. I followed the number plates to the huge mahogany door with a brushed metal nameplate. I knocked once, heard a soft click, and stepped inside. The penthouse smelled like cedar and fresh espresso. A woman in a tailored blazer handed me the sous she tray instead of cash or card. She nodded toward a marble console table where I could place the order. I obeyed, sliding the bag off my shoulder and setting it down gently. As I turned to leave, she slipped me an envelope, white, thick paper, no return address. I glanced back at the empty room, mod-style couches, abstract paintings, a chandelier that looked like icicles frozen in glass. She watched me from the shadows, expression neutral, and the door closed behind me before I realized what I was holding. Outside, the elevator doors clicked shut above me. I fished the envelope from my pocket. It felt weighty, like it contained important documents. I waited for the lobby to clear, then opened it. Inside were 3 sheets of paper, each covered in feed-style listings, stock symbols, buy and sell prices, target dates. Bold red arrows pointed to certain figures, next to annotations like "pump before close" or "sell at 88." It was precision guidance for insider trading, delivered to me in a rain-scent fresh envelope. My pulse spiked. I'd never seen detailed tips written on paper before, let alone for a high-roller penthouse. The pages were formatted like trading screens from Bloomberg terminals. Whoever lived in 52B had direct access to non-public market data and trusted me, some random dasher, to move it. I imagined them crouched behind those walls, watching the hall camera and timing the door click so I got the envelope without witnesses. I glanced around the silent lobby. Elevator doors still closed. Nobody was watching except for the security desk 2 floors down. If I got caught with those sheets, I'd look like I was part of a corporate heist. I shoved the pages back in the envelope and zipped it into my inner jacket pocket, heart thumping. I tapped delivered on the app and rode the elevator down with a forced calmness, smiling at the doorman as he asked if everything was okay. Once outside, I wheeled my bike toward the curb and scanned the address one more time. I'd just become a mule for a shadow financial operation that could tank entire portfolios. I hopped on, pulled the envelope tighter inside my jacket, and pedaled toward home under neon streetlights and honking taxis. I replayed the exchange with the penthouse owner, wondering if she tested me or just trusted me. Her nails were painted the same shade as the arrows on those sheets, bold red. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, locked my bike, and dropped the insulated bag on the floor. I stood over the envelope like it was radioactive, sweat beating on my temples. I ripped it open again, scanned the tips one by one. Biotech Pharma, buy at 27.50. Tech Startup X, sell at 102.75. Commodity Key, short before Fed announcement. These weren't casual rumors. They were precise, down to the cent, with target windows only insiders could know. My head spun. I booted up my laptop, logged into my brokerage, and saw I still held a few shares of Biotech Pharma from earlier. Without thinking, I sold them all at 27.45. My finger hovered over confirm, then I hit it. The sale went through instantly, and I watched the confirmation pop up. I refreshed the market data feed from my phone. Share price surged to 27.80 a minute later. I closed my eyes, feeling a rush. I wasn't supposed to use this info, but the next tip said sell at in bold. I clicked sell all before my brain could argue. That afternoon, my account showed a fat profit, enough to cover rent, and I thought it made the smartest move of my life. But then news alerts popped up that SEC had just launched an investigation into insider trading tied to Argent Tower. I watched open market volatility hit those same symbols. Worst part was, I remembered the annotations on the tip sheet about dump before headlines. My stomach sank knowing I'd been guided by someone who timed trades to avoid suspicion until they squeezed the market. I texted a friend in finance, "You won't believe the tip I got last night." She didn't reply right away, and my phone went silent. I Googled penthouse insider trading scandal and got nothing concrete, just chatter on message boards. I realized it was too clean. A server in that building probably scrubbed logs, cameras before and after a shift wiped. I felt a knot in my chest. I'd just front-ran a market with stolen information. For the next week, I didn't sleep more than 2 hours. Every ping from the app made me jump. I deleted the tip sheets from my cloud backup and phone photos. I changed my brokerage password twice. I thought about contacting the SEC anonymously, sending scanned copies, but I feared being subpoenaed for records of that dinner delivery. I didn't want my name anywhere near insider trading or Argent Tower. I eventually went back to deliveries, coffee shops, pizza joints, local dives, anything where no one slipped me a sealed envelope. I turned off order notifications on high-end apartment buildings. I even started recording front door videos on my phone. I needed proof that I wasn't a willing participant if things blew up. I replaced the sleek insulated bag with an old, beaten one that looked less professional. The last time I saw a penthouse order, I skipped it. The app sent an apology pop-up, assuming I just canceled. I didn't explain. Every shift since then, I've checked my reflection in shop windows, watching my own eyes for fear or greed. I've learned that money's easy to grab when it's handed to you in a sealed envelope, but it can weigh you down for weeks afterward. I still get a thrill from profit, but now I wonder who's really calling the shots, and what price will I pay when their plan comes to light. The sun hadn't even cracked the sky when my phone buzzed with a breakfast delivery order for a place called Willow Creek Farm. I yawned, rubbed my eyes, and pulled on my jacket over pajamas. The shift was kicking off way too early. Riding my bike down empty suburban streets felt oddly peaceful until I turned onto a gravel lane flanked by cornfields. The farmhouse looked straight out of a postcard, white clapboard walls, a wraparound porch, and a plume of smoke curling from the chimney. Perfect spot for pancakes and eggs, right? I locked my bike on a split rail fence and grabbed the insulated bag. The gravel crunch underfoot echoed across the fields as I climbed the steps to the porch. No welcome mat, just a single lantern flickering beside a heavy oak door. I knocked once, set the bag down, and heard footsteps inside. The door cracked open and a guy in a flannel shirt handed me a stack of cash before I could say anything. When I reached to take it, he pressed another paper into my hand. A work order marked urgent equipment. My eyebrows shot up. I glanced at the breakfast. Fresh biscuits, bacon, fruit. The food items were normal enough, but the order sheet cracked open like a secret door. I flipped it over and saw sketches of cameras. Tiny bullet cams, dome cams, even hidden microphones. Under each drawing was an address: neighbor's barn, the silo by the creek, the grain shed behind the corn. My heart did a backflip. I realized they wanted me to plant surveillance gear as part of a land dispute, using my delivery uniform as cover. I looked at the farmer's weathered face. His jaw was tight, hands calloused, eyes set like stones. He nodded toward the bag. I felt trapped between a polite nod and a giant ethical red flag. If I refused, he'd probably stiff me on the tip or worse. I flipped the sheet back and forth in my hand, weighed my options. A morning calm evaporated. I slipped the breakfast box back into the bag and dug out the delivery receipt. I tapped delivered on the app without thinking and handed over the food. The farmer guided me toward his pickup truck parked near the barn. I followed, dread in my chest. When he popped the tailgate, I saw a stack of unmarked boxes, each one packed tight with wires, lens housings, and rainproof casings. He opened the nearest box, slapped it on the tailgate, and handed me the gear along with a second sheet of instructions. My fingers shook as I lifted a long metal bracket. It looked like a mounting arm for a roof gutter. He pointed to a high window on the barn and said to install the dome cam there so I could no questions record anyone who came and went. He didn't need to say more. I felt like a spy in those moments, uniform unbuttoned at the collar, sweaty palms gripping cables. I nodded and walked back to the porch. He handed me another envelope, this one sealed with a sticker. Keys to the barn, he said. Do it before noon. Then he climbed into his truck, fired it up, and drove off, headlights bouncing shadows across the corn. I stood there a second, the key slipping cold in my palm. My breath caught. I hated confrontation, but I also hated being complicit in dirty tricks. I wondered if I could call the app or local council, but I feared he'd trace it back to me and ruin my record. I was out of options. I swallowed, locked eyes with the closing taillights, and turned toward the barn. Inside, the air smelled like hay and old machinery. I slid the keys into the padlock, twisted and pushed the door open. Knuckles scraped wood as I stepped into the dim interior. The barn stalls were empty, just hay bales and feeding troughs. I propped the door open with a 2x4 and set the gear down on a bale. My delivery bag dropped to the floor, dented by a box of cameras. I crouched and flipped up the mounting sheet. Step 1. Attach metal bracket to upper beam near the east window. Step 2. Connect power line through wall. Step 3. Test camera feed on provided tablet. The tablet lay wrapped in bubble wrap inside one box. I uncased it, clicked it on, and a black screen blinked to life with login fields. No username, no password. I was already logged in. A tapping sound fetched my attention. A small red dot in the corner of the screen blinked, then a live feed popped up. It showed the farmer's house front door. A second feed cycled through the neighbor's porch light. I spun around and realized this operation was more extensive than just spying on property lines. They'd set up cameras all over the area, creating a grid. It wasn't just about farmers, it was about everyone in the rural community. I felt my heart cave in. These neighbors were people I sometimes waved to in passing, dads heading off to work, moms walking dogs, and now their private lives were on display. The screen flicked to a third feed, the creaky porch I'd stood on minutes earlier. There was a timestamp. 7:13 a.m. I'd already become part of it. I tapped the screen, found a menu, and saw options to pan, tilt, zoom. Each one had a cost, an extra layer of permission, but I had the tablet, the login, and probably admin rights. Every line of code felt like a violation. I shoved the tablet back into its case, slammed the barn door shut behind me, and bolted for the farmhouse porch. I grabbed the work order sheets, ripped them in half, and scattered the pieces among the corn stalks. Then I emptied the hardware boxes into the mud at the edge of the driveway, tossing brackets, cameras, cables, all mashed in the dirt. I wanted whatever evidence I could destroy. My bike was still locked to the fence. I hopped on, but paused to look back at the white farmhouse, smoke trailing from the chimney like nothing had changed. My fingers clenched the empty delivery bag strap as I pedaled away. The gravel road rattled beneath my tires as I raced toward home, pieces of bracket jingling in my panniers. When I got to my front porch, I set the empty bag down and pressed my forehead against the wooden door. I tried to steady my breath. My mind buzzed with worry. Would the farmer notice the missing deer by noon? Would he figure out a fake delivery? Or would he just chalk it up to a missing shipment and reassign a contractor? I tossed the rest of the delivery bag into the trash, washed my jacket in the laundry room, and scrubbed my hands until they stung. I didn't delete the app, but I turned off hotspot for unknown addresses. I updated my notes. No more rural drop-offs without a storefront. Even then, I'd think twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pictured cameras blinking inside dark barns, screens counting sheep huddled in their stalls. I thought about those neighbors unwittingly recorded and felt sick. By dawn, I emailed the local planning office, anonymous tip about unauthorized surveillance equipment at Willow Creek Farm. I deleted the draft, but I knew someone would act on it. I still take deliveries, but now I carry a small flashlight and a recorder. Before I leave, I check windows, look for brackets, footprints near doors. Every ring, every ping, every address could be a front for something bigger. And I remember that sunny morning at Willow Creek Farm, how easy it was to slip cameras into an innocent parcel. I learned that technology turns ordinary people into unwitting spies, all thanks to a breakfast delivery that started with pancakes and ended in a spiderweb of suspicion. The storefront looked deserted when I pulled up, weathered wood panels, a single open sign dangling in the window, and faded posters advertising cookie drives and toy collections. It called itself Hope and Hands Charity, and my app pinged a request for event materials delivery. It sounded like brochures or banners for a bake sale, a simple promotional job. I grabbed the box marked Public Distribution and headed inside, expecting to see volunteers, donation jars, maybe a hot cocoa station. I didn't get any of that. Inside, the narrow shop was lined with clear donation boxes stamped Support Candidate X and Defeat Candidate Y, each overflowing with cash bills instead of cans of food or toys. No bake sale, no friendly volunteers, just a half-lit interior and a clipboard with a list of addresses for down-ballot outreach. I set the box on a chip display table cluttered with campaign flyers and realized I'd walked into a front for laundering political donations through fake charitable events. My heart thudded. I rubbed the back of my neck and glanced around. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No register, no coffee urn, just those donation boxes funneling money to political coffers disguised as charity. I unzipped the delivery bag and pulled out the printed leaflets I'd brought, event schedules, charity logos, volunteer sign-up sheets. They were blank on the back, but I spotted a fresh stack in the corner with handwritten notes. Target demographics, precinct maps, times to call donors. These weren't charity materials. They were campaign pamphlets sent through a nonprofit guise. I felt a cold knot form in my chest. I flipped through the notes. Neighborhoods with high senior populations, low tax districts, union households marked resistance. This fake charity was channeling donations directly into campaign war chests and using DoorDash couriers like me to deliver propaganda kits under the pretense of community outreach. They counted me to be none the wiser, just another gig worker moving boxes from point A to B. I placed the leaflets back in the case, snapped the zipper shut, and tapped Delivered on the app like everything was normal. The app chirped acknowledgement and pinged the next order request, a pizza run 10 blocks away. I ignored it, slipped the delivery bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the back of the store where a flimsy curtain blocked a hallway. A single bulb flickered as I peeked past it, and saw rows of filing cabinets labeled donor records, bank transfers, audit trails. This wasn't just funds collection. It was an entire operation to convert cash into campaign ads, then recycle it as charitable receipts. I pulled my phone out and snapped a quick photo of the cabinets. My thumb hovered over the shutter button until I remembered I was in a political scandal, not a vlog. I deleted the image, slid the phone into my pocket, and backed into the main room. No one was watching me, but I could almost feel eyes on my back. The hush was unsettling, like a vacuum where normal chatter should be. I reached into the delivery bag again, pulled out the box of supplies, and deposited it on the cracked hardwood floor. Then I fished out the clipboard from the corner and tucked it between the leaflets. Despite my urge to dash out, I needed proof. I tapped the pages with my finger, memorizing names of organizers I'd never heard of and phone numbers for donors who'd likely never see their money go to charity. I felt like I was holding a piece of someone else's dirty secret. A door opened behind me and a gaunt man in a suit stepped into the room. No apology for the mess, no, thanks for the delivery. He reached for the clipboard, tapped it against his palm, then looked at me expectantly. I swallowed hard, set the clip on the table, and said nothing. He nodded, grabbed the box of materials, and disappeared through the curtain into the back hallway. The click of the door echoed down the empty aisle. I slid toward the front door, grabbed the handle, and stepped outside into the afternoon sun, blinking. The cool air hit my face, felt like a breath of freedom. I didn't wait for another order. I walked to my bike, swung a leg over, and pedaled off without looking back. My hands trembled on the handlebars, the clipboard's weight in my bag reminding me of what I'd seen. I wanted to call someone, a news outlet, the election commission, a lawyer friend, but I worried they'd trace it back to me, and then I'd be tangled in their scandal. So I texted an anonymous tip to the state's election fraud hotline. Fake charity delivering campaign materials under non-profit guise. Front at 412 Maple Street, donation boxes labeled Support Candidate X. Then I deleted the message, cleared my outbox, and closed my phone. Riding home, I thought of all the real charities I volunteered for. Soup kitchens, animal shelters, places that actually needed the money. This one perverted public trust, turning good intentions into slush funds. I realized how easily a delivery driver could be co-opted into a larger scheme, something innocuous on an app screen, but in reality helping rig an election. I parked in front of my apartment, leaned the bike against the wall, and emptied the clipboard on my coffee table. I flipped through the pages, each line a reminder of the deception I had witnessed. I tossed the next order alert into the recycled bin without a glance and pulled a small pad to jot down details before they slipped from my memory. Page numbers of the donors list, the store's plywood sign out front, the phone number on the clipboard. That night, I couldn't sleep. I imagined donors' faces, thinking their money was gone to kids in need, not yard signs and targeted mailers. In the morning, I phoned a local reporter I'd met at a town hall meeting, left a secure voicemail, an invitation to look into Hope and Hands Charity. I erased call logs, changed my voicemail greeting, and tried to pretend nothing out of the ordinary happened. Back on the app, I started ignoring any orders tagged charity, community, or volunteer. I stuck to restaurants with visible staff, places with people talking, coffee shops buzzing with life. I felt safer delivering a latte than a box of deceit. Every time I pass an empty storefront, I wonder what's behind the door. I remember that cracked hardwood floor and those donation boxes, how easy it was to twist charity into campaign cash, using an app I trusted. I still need the gigs, but I'll never pick up for Hope and Hands Charity again. I pedaled through pounding rain that night, headlights cutting through sheets of water like lasers. The app pinged Emergency Relief Center, drop supplies. I'd grown up through storms here, so delivery to a relief center sounded routine. Blankets, bottled water, maybe flashlights. I could get in, unload, and be back home before my socks soaked through. I rounded the corner onto Pine Street and froze. What I thought was a school gym repurposed as a shelter looked empty. No signs, no banners, just a narrow door cracked open against the storm. I grabbed my insulated bag and slipped inside. The fluorescent lights flickered over rows of cots, each one neatly made but eerily vacant. A few desks had clipboards stacked with forms, but the room was silent except for the drips from a leaky pipe. I called up delivery here, but my voice vanished up into the rafters. I set the blankets and water bottles down, glanced at the testing station by the gym entrance. Hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, but nobody came to greet me. I reached into my bag for the inventory sheet when I felt a rustle behind a curtain at the back. My heart skipped. I peeled the curtain back and found a hallway lined with filing cabinets. I peered inside one drawer and saw folders labeled Worker 1099, Contractor Invoice, Claim Form. I yanked it open and pulled out a stack of claim forms, signed, dated, stamped by the center. But these forms weren't for disaster relief. They were work contracts in triplicate listing daily wages of $2 per hour and authorizing transport to local farms, construction sites, warehouses. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The storm raged outside, rain drumming on the metal roof. I realized this relief center was a front for labor brokers, shelling undocumented workers into exploitative jobs instead of helping them find shelter. The cots weren't for refugees. They were temporary beds while staff processed exploitation contracts. I rifled through the drawer and found receipts for meals collected from Dasher deliveries. My bag had held sandwiches and juice boxes destined to feed these workers until they got to the sites, where they'd work 12-hour days under the table. A fluorescent bulb flickered and I ducked as the center's volunteer coordinator appeared, a woman in a neon vest, clipboard in hand. She looked at me, pale-faced in the harsh light, and asked if I found the supply drop. I shrugged, said yes, and she gestured to the cots. "Make sure the bags go to each person," she said, voice flat. I nearly gagged. I told her I saw the contracts pointed at the drawers. She glanced in, frowned, and said, "Those are private files." I felt anger and fear mix in my chest. I had two choices, leave quietly or call someone. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over 911, but thought about caller ID on my account, the logs the center would keep, the risk of retaliation if I was traced back. I zipped the bag, took a deep breath, and said, "These people need real help. They're not contractors. They are being exploited." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, said relief centers don't handle labor disputes. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in that fluorescent haze. I dropped the blankets by the cots and grabbed a stack of forms before she could return. I tucked them into my jacket pocket, replaced the drawer items haphazardly, and slipped out the door. The rain hit me like a slap as I ran for my bike, heart pounding. I barely locked the frame before I sprinted down the street, soaked and trembling. At home, I paced my cramped living room with forms fanned out on the coffee table. Every signature was someone's name. People who trusted this place for shelter only to be funneled into exploitation. I wanted to destroy the forms, but I needed proof. I snapped photos with my burner phone, careful to capture the center's official stamp on each page. I texted a friend who works for a legal aid nonprofit. "Got proof of labor trafficking under relief center cover. Can you advise?" No reply yet. I typed up a quick anonymous tip to the state labor board. Emergency center at Pine Street repurposed as labor brokerage exploiting undocumented workers. I attached blurred photos of the center's logo on the clipboards and the contract forms. I deleted the text thread, cleared my browser history, and stared at the empty boxes of blankets and water still bundled in the corner. I felt sick. By dawn, I got a reply from my legal aid friend. She contacted a local immigrant rights group and asked me to meet them at a cafe. By 10 o'clock a.m., I took a quick shower, changed into dry clothes, and rode through puddles to the meeting. 2 social workers and a volunteer attorney greeted me. I handed over the photos and forms, explained what I'd seen. They nodded gravely, said they'd coordinate a raid with labor inspectors and prepare safe housing for the workers. They promised to protect my identity. Riding home, the sky started brightening. My legs felt like jelly, mind buzzing with relief and dread. I realized those cots would soon stand empty for a while. But what about the days I delivered there before without noticing? How many meals had I handed off? How many contracts had I helped shuffle? I rode past that shuttered storefront on Pine Street and felt a pang of shame. Back at my apartment, I left my bag in the corner, taped a note to my fridge. Check ID on relief centers. No more mystery drops. I'd learned that emergency could be twisted into opportunity for the worst kind of exploitation. That night, when my phone pinged for the next order, I tapped decline without thinking. Then I deleted the app and logged back in, but only accepted orders from verified storefronts. Weeks later, I heard news of a joint labor board and immigration raid on that relief center. They freed dozens of workers, filed criminal charges, and offered legal protection. I never stepped forward publicly. I let them use my anonymous tip. But each night I think of those workers sleeping on cots, trusting helpers, and instead finding forms that signed their lives away. And I remember how easy it was to confuse charity with coercion, all because of a delivery app ping I took without a second thought. I thought my shift would be the usual routine: coffee orders, bagels, the kind of predictable Monday morning grind that pays the rent. When the app pinged a delivery to a basement office in the downtown arts district, I expected an indie gallery or maybe a theater troupe's break room. Instead, I found myself navigating a graffiti-tagged alley behind a shuttered storefront and descending concrete stairs, stained with who knows what. My heart thumped, but the tip was $2 above average, so I squared my shoulders and carried the bag down into the dim space below. The light bulb overhead buzzed as I stepped into a narrow hallway lined with filing cabinets and racks of plastic folders. A sign scrawled in marker on masking tape read, "Client Records. Authorized personnel only." I tapped the delivery sticker on the wall beside a door and heard a click. Inside, the room smelled like stale air freshener mixed with printer fumes. A single desk lamp cast a pool of yellow over a desk crowded with color-coded folders and unmarked boxes. I set the coffee cups and daniches on the desk, feeling like an intruder. That's when I saw the manila envelope poking out from beneath a pile of paper. My name was on it, and inside were sheets of paper listing dozens of children, full names, birth dates, home addresses, even school information. Next to each name was a line reading subscription active until, and a credit card number masked except for the last 4 digits. My breath caught. I recognized one kid's name, my neighbor's daughter, who I'd waved to on the bus stop this morning. I stared at the envelope, cool dread spreading. These weren't medical records or school forms. They were marketing lists for a subscription service targeting minors. It was a predatory scheme, using personal data without consent to build recurring revenue off families. I pictured slick video ads, automated emails chasing parents, kids receiving unwanted packages. Worse, someone could manipulate these lists for more sinister purposes. A rustle behind me made me spin. A woman in a smart blazer leaned against a filing cabinet, arms crossed, watching me. She didn't ask if I'd deliver the food. She didn't say thanks. She said, "You'll need to upload the scans today." Her voice was flat, professional, no hint of moral conflict. She pointed at a scanner next to the folders. I looked back at the list of private data, felt my stomach twist. Closed the envelope, slid it into my jacket pocket, and said nothing. She stepped forward, abandoned politeness. We moved fast. Get it done. I knew she meant she wanted me to scan these kids' data into their CRM system and delete the originals. I realized I'd been recruited as a courier for digital records, not just coffee. My shift had just become a crime in progress. I cleared my throat and tapped the scanner button, but my hands hovered over the feeders. The folders were right there, each labeled by age group, under 10, 10 to 13, 14 to 17. The idea of running that data through a scanner made me feel complicit. I pictured the bits zipping into some database, fueling targeted ads, or worse, paving the way for data breaches exposing minors to real threats. She sighed like I was an annoyance. "You're getting paid. Do it now." I blinked, wondered if I could say no. Thoughts swirled, call the cops, destroy the folders, quit on the spot. But I'd seen her swipe an ID card to unlock the cabinets. If I stalled, she'd lock up and call security. I felt cornered, but knew I couldn't just comply. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and snapped a quick photo of the top sheet showing partial credit card numbers and home addresses. My thumb shook as I tapped the camera icon. She leaned over my shoulder, caught a glimpse, and frowned. "That's confidential." She moved to grab my phone. I bolted, shoving the desk chair aside, and raced back up the stairs, the filing cabinet door creaking shut behind me. I burst into the alley, rain starting to spit down, and scrambled onto my bike. My legs pumped as I pedaled away from the basement, heart pounding like a subway train. I didn't stop until I reached a 24-hour diner under a street lamp, where I locked my bike and sat with the photo still in my camera roll. I ordered black coffee, no sugar, to calm my nerves, and opened my phone's notes. I typed the address of the basement office, the company name I glimpsed on the paperwork, and saved the photo as evidence. I texted a friend who works at a children's advocacy nonprofit. Just intercepted a subscription service targeting minors. Need advice. I pressed send, hands still shaking. As I waited, I scrolled the photo, full names of kids I might see again, their birthdays, their schools. I thought of parents trusting their info to apps, never guessing someone would funnel it into a shady subscription scheme. When my friend called back, she said to reach out to the privacy watchdog agency, file an anonymous tip with attached photo, and then go to the police if I felt safe. I paid my bill, left a generous tip, and pedaled back home through dark streets slick with rain. I deleted the app's delivery record for that address. No need to leave a paper trail. I texted the nonprofit. Sent tip. I'm done with that shift. Then I fell into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of my neighbor's kid getting bills for products she never ordered. Morning came and I filed a report with the privacy agency's portal, drag and drop the photo, enter the address details, summarize what I saw. The website asked if I wanted to be contacted. I clicked no. I deleted the email draft, cleared browser history, and uninstalled the Courier app. I needed a break. I spent the next week helping the nonprofit review the logs I'd submitted. They thanked me for quick action. They encouraged me to report any other misuse of data. I never went back to that basement office. I switched to pick-up-only shifts at cafes I knew. I kept my phone camera ready, logging every unusual catch. And every time I scroll social media or see a new subscription offers ad, I think of those folders lining that dim basement, and of how easy it is for someone to prey on kids with a little data and a lot of anonymity. That Friday afternoon stretched out like any other as I cruised through the suburbs, windows down, sun beating on my arms. I just wrapped up a greasy burger run and was craving lemonade. So the next ping for a taco order in Crestwood Heights felt like a gift. I found myself at the end of a perfect little cul-de-sac, lawn sprinklers misting over bright azaleas, kids' bikes left on driveways, mailboxes standing like sentinels. I parked beneath a maple whose leaves rattled in the breeze, grabbed my insulated bag, and started toward the house. The place had the look of a stage family home, matching rocking chairs on the porch, potted ferns flanking the front door, wind chimes tinkling softly even though I hadn't heard them sway. The instructions said, leave on porch. No need to knock. I set the bag on a small bistro table beside the door, checked the name on the app against the address, and straightened the napkin under the containers. That's when I felt a slight weight against my thigh. I reached down and found a tiny, matte black flash drive clipped to the pocket of my uniform pants. At first, it was a mix-up. Maybe a neighbor had dropped it in my pocket earlier. I tugged it free, eyed it in my hand, then realized someone had tucked it there on purpose. My pulse hit fast. I looked at the dark windows, half expecting movement behind the curtains, but the house sat silent. I zipped the drive into my jacket pocket, tapped completed in the app, and turned away without glancing back. Riding back to my car, my mind spun. I'd worked this neighborhood a dozen times, never had anything weird happen. But here was a data device slipped surreptitiously into my pocket. I tried to focus on the next order coming through. Garlic knots in 4 minutes, but the weird quiet in my head refused to let me. By the time I reached home, the sun was folding behind rooftops and the cicadas droned in the hedges. My roommate was on the couch with a beer in hand, smack dab in the middle of a late-night show rerun. I slipped inside, hung my jacket on a hook, and fetched my laptop. I didn't open my mouth to mention the flash drive. I just sat at the kitchen table, slid it into the USB port, and let my curiosity take over. The drive's contents sprang to life in a window full of files, PDFs, spreadsheets, image files. The first folder was labeled patrol _routes. I clicked open, wrote /_ and saw a detailed map of our city's north side, blue lines following every street segment. Annotated time slots marked where police cruisers cruise between 8 and 10 in the morning. Another sheet, road /_B, showed evening patrols. I scrolled through files labeled shift /_C and citizen /response /times. Seeing this level of detail, car unit numbers, VINs, dispatcher notes, it was clear someone had pulled off the city's enforcement data. The next folder, called protest _plans, rattle me even more. Inside were documents titled downtown /_ demo / schedule, low / coverage / zones, police / coverage / gap / August 15 docs. They laid out planned dates and times for demonstrations, points where crowd density would overwhelm a single patrol car, instructions for flash mobs to block intersections. It was a game plan for seizing control of public spaces, time to exploit minimal police presence. I felt like I'd delivered the blueprint for a takeover. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I pictured myself strolling away from that porch, oblivious, while a step-by-step guide to outmaneuvering cops sat in my pocket. I tried to imagine motives. Were these activists plotting a massive civil disobedience, or extremists planning something darker? Either way, I'd played career without knowing it. I stared at the last folder, organizer contacts, a spreadsheet full of cell numbers and email addresses, anyone who clicked attend on a semi-official protest site. Names and aliases listed, some real names, some handles like Liberty Fox and Iron Oak. I tapped one number in my phone's keypad, thumb hovering over call. No, I couldn't call. If they'd slipped me the drive, they might have a way to track who used a number. I backed out. My pulse hammered as I sat in the dim kitchen, fluorescent bulbs humming overhead. Every possible option felt risky. Turning over the drive to the police department sounded right in theory, but then they'd ask how I got it, which meant admitting I'd carried it without knowing. I'd be questioned, maybe even charged with impeding an investigation, or worse, conspiring. I pictured my ID floating around a police database. Delivery driver, possible accomplice. Deleting the files felt like erasing evidence of a crime, but leaving them felt like carrying a weapon. I reopened each file, tested if anything was copied, then hit Command A, delete. I emptied the trash, watched the storage indicator flicker back to normal. The drive lay quietly in my laptop slot. I pulled it out and flipped it over on the table, then reached for a small screwdriver I keep for random repairs. I unscrewed the casing, prying it open gently until I could pop out the circuit board. No one would ever plug it in again. I snapped the board in half, tossed the fragments in a trash bag, and recycled the plastic shell. A few pieces of metal sat on the table, cold and useless. I swept them into the trash too, and sealed the bag and carried it outside to the dumpster. My heart was still pounding as I pressed the lid down. Back inside, I sat on the couch, shoulders tight. I deleted the gig app from my phone, wiped the cache, and changed my delivery preferences to in-store pickup only. I told my roommate I was done with driving for a while, had a run of bad luck with orders. She patted my shoulder but didn't pry. That night, sleep eluded me. I replayed the day, the porch drop, the courier routine, the quiet click of the flash drive hitting my leg. I thought about law enforcement dashboards and protest organizers sending me packets of secret instructions. I imagined news alerts, unwitting courier linked to protest conspiracy. When dawn finally arrived, I made a pot of coffee and stared out the window at the street where I'd left my fellow dashers moments ago. By midday, I drafted an anonymous tip email to the city's intelligence unit. No personal info, just details about the data packet slipping through a civilian's hands. I erased the draft and decided better of it. If they already had enough to secure a warrant, my tip might be unnecessary. I settled on one final step. I called a local newspaper's crime reporter, left a vague voicemail. Information at risk, consult flash drive patrol routes, protest data. Then I deleted the call log and my voicemail logs. I haven't driven for DoorDash since. I still pick up coffee on the way to my barista shift in the mornings, but I leave my bike at home now. Every ping of a delivery app sends my chest tight. I remind myself that a simple taco run can hide far more than just fresh salsa in the bag. And every time I see a perfect suburban porch, I think of that small, unmarked flash drive that turned my shift into something I never signed up for.